If I hadn't known in advance that he had never driven a car, I would have thought that he was an experienced driver for many years. Coach, I observed him for 2 or 3 hours today and found that his learning ability was terrifying. In the end, his driving skills could be regarded as first class. Most importantly, do you know what it is? Zhao Dequan showed a surprised look and asked, "What is it?" Coach Li said, "From the time I started teaching him to the time he left, he didn't even make a single mistake. Can you imagine it? A new student who started learning and practiced on the road many times without making a single mistake. He's simply a freak reincarnated from the god of driving." Zhao Dequan was so shocked that he couldn't speak. It's said that people make mistakes and horses stumble. It's inevitable to make mistakes when you've just learned something. But he had never seen a person who didn't make a single mistake after practicing for a few hours. Now it was the first time he had heard of it. Forget it. It's a good thing that he learns fast. I was afraid that he would get his driver's license through illegal means and have an accident while driving. Well, you did a good job on this matter. I'll write it down. You go ahead. All right. Coach Li replied and left the principal's office. Zhao Dequan took out his mobile from his pocket and dialed Long Hanwen's number. After the other party picked up, he said with a smile, "Boss Long, did I disturb you? Is this Principal Zhao?" "It's all right. You called me because—" Long Hanwen's voice came out of the phone. Zhao Dequan said with an obsequious smile, "Chief Long, I'll report to you about the matter you've arranged for me. Tan Xiu came to the driving school this morning. I've specially arranged the best instructor to teach him driving skills. The instructor just came to me and said that Tan Xiu has left. He's simply the reincarnation of the god of driving. He practiced for the whole morning and didn't make a single mistake. I think that with his level, it's not a problem for him to be an instructor in our driving school." Long Hanwen said, "I know. I'll have to trouble you." Zhao Dequan said with a smile, "It's my duty. It's what I should do. Chief Long, you don't need to worry about Tan Xiu's driver's license. I've had several meals with my friends from the Transportation Bureau. If there's no accident, I'll definitely hand over the driver's license to him within 10 days to half a month." Long Hanwen was silent for a moment. Then he slowly said, "Principal Zhao, I'll remember everything you've done. I'll also do my best to help your son. If there's no accident, I'll be able to get him out of prison within 10 days to half a month. However, after he's out, I hope you can secretly send him abroad through improper channels as soon as possible. The crime he committed is not a trivial matter." Zhao Dequan said gratefully, "Yes, yes, yes. I'll keep your words in mind." Long Hanwen said, "All right then, I'll say it like that." The call ended. Zhao Dequan forced a smile as he put away his mobile and rubbed his temples. For his son, he had crossed his bottom line. Originally, he was still a bit condemned in his heart. But after hearing that Tan Xiu's driving skills were amazing, he finally felt a lot better. At noon, Tan Xiu arrived at the Caesar Grand Hotel. Yesterday's incident had caused the guests to leave the Caesar Grand Hotel. The originally bustling hotel was now deserted. Only some attendants and environmental workers were still doing their work. 4 more security guards have been added. It seems that the Caesar Grand Hotel's business has suffered a serious impact. Tan Xiu faintly smiled. Under the watchful eyes of many staff, he took the elevator to the guest room where Chen Wei was staying. What he didn't expect was that Chen Wei was unexpectedly sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed at noon, applying a facial mask. Looking at the black plaster-like facial mask on her face, Tan Xiu secretly smiled wryly. "Hey, weird girl. Take off the facial mask on your face and change your clothes. I'll take you out for a meal." Chen Wei blinked her eyes and snorted, "Why are we having a meal so early? It's still 10 minutes away from 12 noon. Besides, I've applied the facial mask for less than 10 minutes. So, just sit down and wait." Tan Xiu said, "I know you're very slow in applying makeup, but I'll wait for you until 12:30. If you still don't want to go out, then I'll go eat by myself. I've been staying in the driving school all morning. You might not be hungry, but I am." "Stingy man." Chen Wei curled her lips and slowly closed her eyes. 1 o'clock. With a dark expression, Tan Xiu followed behind Chen Wei and slowly went out of the Caesar Grand Hotel's entrance. Although he said he would only wait until 12:30, Chen Wei, that weird girl, still dawdled until 1 o'clock. She even ran to the bathroom to relieve herself before going out. "What do you want to eat?" As they came to the street, Tan Xiu asked. Chen Wei snorted and said, "I want to eat the highest grade." Tan Xiu said, "It's not convenient for me to take you to eat the highest grade. But I can take you to taste the second highest grade." Chen Wei rolled her eyes and said, "If you want to go, then go to the highest grade. Otherwise, don't go." Tan Xiu said, "The best grade is my mom's cooking." Chen Wei's breathing stagnated. She immediately said with an embarrassed smile, "Then let's go to the second highest grade. I'm actually very easy to compromise." Tan Xiu directly stopped a taxi. After getting on the car, he said, "Master, to the Long's dining hall." The taxi driver turned his head and looked at Tan Xiu with a surprised expression. He hesitated and said, "Do you really want to go to the Long's dining hall? The expenses there are not ordinary. Moreover, if you want to eat in the Long's dining hall, you need to pass the threshold. I heard that they have set up a membership system. If you're not a member, I'm afraid you can't even enter the door." Tan Xiu said, "I'm a member." The taxi driver turned his head with some awe. To be able to become a member of the Long's dining hall meant that one's identity and background were not simple. One must know that to be able to spend money there, one must have a certain status. One must also have a certain status. However, he didn't know that the reason why Tan Xiu was able to become a member of the Long's dining hall was entirely because of his relationship with Long Zhengyu. Chen Wei asked with an astonished expression, "Master, you said that the Long's dining hall standard is really that high?" The taxi driver said with a forced smile, "It's more than high. It's simply ridiculously high. I heard that you need to spend at least 1 million yuan to be eligible to become a member. Moreover, only the big shots of Star City, the surrounding cities, and even the big shots of the provincial capital, Blue City, can get the membership. A lot of rich bosses are proud to enter the Long's dining hall." Chen Wei turned her head to look at Tan Xiu and said with an astonished expression, "I heard from Qingwu that your family runs a restaurant. Where did you get the membership?" Tan Xiu said, "Curiosity kills. You better control your mouth when you speak. You can open your mouth freely when you eat. In short, remember that I'll make you eat and drink to your heart's content today." Chen Wei curled her lips and said with disdain, "You're really pretending. I'm afraid that we won't even be able to enter the door. I'll tell you, if we can't enter the door, I'll definitely pretend that I don't know you and turn around to leave." Tan Xiu looked at the fast retreating buildings outside the window and said with indifference, "You can directly open the door now and turn around to leave." Chen Wei rolled her eyes, "I don't want to die." Chapter 210. The Long's dining hall had a height of 49 floors, resembling two golden dragons with a ball-shaped presidential suite in the middle, implying that the two dragons were playing with a pearl. Looking from afar, the imposing and majestic posture gave people a sense of oppression. Outside the imposing entrance, for security guards stood on both sides like javelins, while a welcoming lady in a formal dress kept a smile on her face as she checked the VIP membership cards of the guests. At the entrance, one by one, the luxury cars stopped and left. A taxi parked at the entrance suddenly attracted a lot of people's attention. Those pairs of eyes were filled with contempt and contempt. Tan Xiu walked out of the car with Chen Wei, who had an unnatural expression on her face. He walked to the front of the welcoming lady and calmly said, "I'm sorry, I forgot to bring my membership card." The welcoming lady looked apologetic as she said, "Sir, you need to show your membership card before you can enter unless you're a frequent visitor." Chen Wei's expression instantly turned a bit unsightly. After hesitating for a moment, she resisted the urge to turn around and leave. Shameful. She felt that it was too shameful. Because she firmly believed that Tan Xiu didn't have a membership card here. He was actually holding a pretentious attitude and wanted to sneak in. Tan Xiu slightly furrowed his brows. He looked at the 4 security guards and found that one of them was the one he saw last time. He immediately waved to the security guard and said, "You, come here." The 4 security guards looked at Tan Xiu. The one who knew Tan Xiu saw that Tan Xiu was calling him and immediately respectfully came to Tan Xiu's front and said, "Hello, Mr. Tang. What can I do for you? Tell her if I'm a frequent visitor here, said Tan Xiao. Mr. Tang has been here many times and is our honored guest, said the security guard welcoming lady. He's also a friend of young Master Long Zhengyu. The welcoming lady's complexion slightly changed. Her expression turned respectful as she nodded and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Tang. Please come in. Tan Xiao nodded. He turned his head to look at Chen Wei, who had an astonished expression on her face, and walked towards the entrance. Even in her dreams, Chen Wei had never thought that things would take a 180-degree turn. The incredulous look in her eyes hadn't faded yet as she hurriedly followed behind Tan Xiao and walked through the door. My God! Isn't this place way too luxurious? Compared to those 5-star hotels overseas, it was much more luxurious. Tan Xiao, are you really a member here? Chen Wei sized him up for a while and asked with an exaggerated expression. Tan Xiao said, If I wasn't a member here, do you think we could have come in? Chen Wei curiously said, But that taxi driver said that only rich and powerful people can dine here. Why did you? Tan Xiao sneered. You think I'm not a big shot? Chen Wei snappily said, What kind of big shot are you? At most, he's just a high school graduate with good grades. Tan Xiao shook his head with a smile and sighed, Your IQ is really lacking. Forget it. Aside from having a powerful mouth, I don't have high expectations for your IQ. Let's go. Today, talk less and ask less. Just eat and drink to your heart's content. Chen Wei angrily glared at Tan Xiao. She found that he no longer looked at her and directly went inside. She had no choice but to endure her anger and followed behind Tan Xiao. Presidential suite. Tan Xiao didn't want it, because he thought that he didn't need to spend money to entertain Chen Wei. After all, the price of entering the presidential suite was sky high. Even if he could afford it, he didn't want to waste it. Therefore, he casually asked for an ordinary box and followed the waiter inside. Extravagant. The total area of this box is definitely more than 100 square meters. There's also this big floor-to-ceiling window. Standing in front of the window, you can see half of Star City outside. Chen Wei was like Granny Lu entering the Grandview Garden. Tan Xiao shook his head. He glanced at the waiter, who was covering her mouth and chuckling, and said, Give us a few of your specialty dishes. 4 meat dishes and 2 vegetables, and also a soup. Alright, please wait a moment. The waiter withdrew from the room and soon another waiter came to serve tea. Chen Wei stood by the window and looked at the scenery of the city outside. She sighed and said, The life of the rich is really good. If this great aunt doesn't mix well in the future, I'll simply find a rich second-generation rich man to marry. I'll spend every day drinking and singing every night. Tan Xiao said with a smile, Then I guarantee that your man will beat you until you can't take care of yourself. You're the one who can't take care of yourself. That's right, where's the bathroom? I'm going to touch up my makeup and then wait for the feast. Chen Wei retorted and asked. Tan Xiao said, Go out and ask the waiter. Let her take you there. Alright. Chen Wei nodded and walked out of the box with brisk steps. 4 to 5 minutes later, Tan Xiao's mobile rang in his pocket. When he grabbed it and saw the caller ID, he immediately frowned because it was Chen Wei who called him. Did you forget to bring your sanitary pad when you went to the bathroom? I'm telling you, I'm a gentleman. I'll never go to the women's bathroom. Tan Xiao couldn't help but tease her. Tan Xiao, I seem to be in trouble. Quickly come and help me. Chen Wei's voice sounded a bit panicked. Tan Xiao's expression turned cold as he asked with a heavy tone, What happened? Where are you? Chen Wei said, I'm in the corridor outside the bathroom. I just accidentally hit the potted plant in the corridor. The potted plant happened to hit someone else. The other party wants me to pay for it. Tan Xiao said, Wait for me there. After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiao quickly walked out of the box. After asking the waiter outside for the location of the bathroom, he quickly walked to the left corridor. I'll pay for it. My clothes are worth 58,000 yuan, and my leather shoes are 26,000 yuan. Altogether, it's 84,000 yuan. Also, my leg is very painful, so I must pay for the medical expenses. I'll give you a smaller amount and round it up to 16,000 yuan, a total of 100,000 yuan. If you can't pay for it, It won't be as simple as slapping you. An arrogant voice echoed in the corridor. Can you wait for my friend? He'll be here soon. It was Chen Wei's voice. Waiting for someone? Let me tell you, even if the Heavenly King comes, it's useless. Today you must pay for it. We won't let it go even if you pay less. Fuck, I'm so unlucky. The man's tone was even more arrogant. Tan Xiao was more than 10 meters away from them, but he could clearly see their appearance. He didn't expect that the world was so small. He had taught a lesson to this guy before, and now he met him again. What a big tone. I want to see what the consequences will be if she doesn't pay for it. Tan Xiao walked over and said. Hu Wanjuan's face was filled with anger. When he turned around and saw Tan Xiao's appearance, his pupils suddenly shrunk, and a frightened look was revealed in his eyes. He had heard about the matter between Zhang Deqin and Zhang Yongjin. He even wanted to get involved in it at that time. However, the Zhang family had fallen, and the fate of Zhang Deqin and Zhang Yongjin was unknown. He had suspected that this matter was related to Tan Xiao. How come it's you? Tan Xiao sneered and said, Why can't it be me? She's my friend, and I heard that someone is looking for trouble with her. Hu Wanjun relied on his family background. Even though he knew that Tan Xiao was very strong, but in order to not lose his face, he still said, I said it. What about it? It's not my fault, it's her fault. She knocked the vase and hurt me. It's only right and proper for me to ask her for compensation. How much is it? I'll pay for it, Tan Xiao said indifferently. Hu Wanjun glared at Chen Wei and proudly said, 100,000 yuan. Tan Xiao took out a bank card from his body and handed it over to Hu Wanjun, saying, There's 1 million yuan in this card. I'll pay you 10 times the amount. Are you satisfied? Hu Wanjun stared blankly for a moment. He thought that Tan Xiao was afraid of him. A smile immediately appeared on his face as he nodded and said, Forget it. Just let it be. You're satisfied, but I'm not. Tan Xiao said indifferently. If I'm not mistaken, the slap mark on my friend's face is from you, right? My friend's body is as precious as gold. I won't let off anyone who dares to touch her hair, let alone being slapped. So, you also have to pay for the medical expenses, right? The smile on Hu Wanjuan's face froze. He looked at Tan Xiao with an inconceivable expression and then looked at the bank card in his hand. He suddenly realized and angrily shouted, Are you trying to kill me? Tan Xiao sneered and said, If I wanted to kill you, your corpse would have already appeared in the Pacific Ocean. I'll give you a few chances to pay for my friend's medical expenses, then this matter can be considered settled. Otherwise, I won't let this matter go. Hu Wanjuan's complexion changed. He looked at the box's door in the distance. He took a deep breath and asked, How much do you want? 11 million yuan, Tan Xiao said indifferently. Hiss! Hu Wanjun was not the only one who gasped. Chen Wei's face was also filled with disbelief. Tan Xiao said, I'll give you an hour. If you don't send the money to my box within an hour, I think your Hu family will be like the Zhang family, forever disappearing from Star City and even this world. Remember, this is a threat. After saying that, he reached out and pulled Chen Wei's wrist as they walked toward the box. Chen Wei was pulled by Tan Xiao with a blank expression. If it was before, she would have thrown off Tan Xiao's hand. But now, her heart was filled with warmth. However, the warmth was mixed with a strong sense of crisis. They returned to the box. Chen Wei's complexion was faintly pale as she asked, Tan Xiao, do you think that person will compensate you? You just gave him 1 million yuan. 1 million yuan. Tan Xiao said calmly, he won't dare to not give it. Of course, I hope he won't. Chen Wei gulped down her saliva and no longer spoke. In the corridor, Hu Wanjun was holding the bank card with 1 million yuan in it. He suddenly felt that it was a hot potato. Originally, he could completely ignore Tan Xiao's threat. However, what made his heart tremble and even panic was that Tan Xiao mentioned the Zhang family. What did he mean by that? Could it be that the Zhang family's downfall was because of him? As the TV station's deputy director, Jing Yi has been in a meeting for the whole day. After returning home, she rushed the draft and only completed 3 chapters. I'm really sorry. Tomorrow, I'll make up for the 4 chapters. Please forgive me, brothers and sisters. Chapter 211. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The Zhang family has been operating in Star City for decades and has long been deeply rooted. How could a young brat who hasn't even grown up be able to shake them? Hu Wanjun returned to the box he had just seen in a daze. After entering the door, he returned to his seat in a daze and didn't even glance at the people at the table. Hu Xinmin frowned as he looked at his son's sluggish expression. A displeased expression was revealed in his eyes. He was having a banquet with the company's shareholders, and his son, the first heir of the family, unexpectedly showed such an expression on such an occasion. Wasn't this shameful? Wanjun, what's wrong with you? Hearing Hu Xinmin calling him, Hu Wanjun suddenly quivered. He squeezed out a smile on his face and said, I seem to have run into some trouble. Hu Xinmin asked with a sinking tone, What trouble? Tell me about it. Hu Wanjun recounted what had just happened outside. Finally, he said, Dad, that brat surnamed Tang said that if our Hu family doesn't want to be like the Zhang family, forever disappearing from Star City in this world, then I'll have to pay 11 million yuan as compensation. What? Hu Xinmin's complexion instantly turned extremely unsightly. The shareholders present also looked at each other in dismay with disbelief in their eyes. A middle-aged man opened his mouth and said, Does this young man named Tan Xiu have a grudge with the Zhang family? Hu Wanjun said, Yes. Tan Xiu once beat Zhang Deqin and Zhang Yongjin. Therefore, in order to retaliate against Tan Xiu, Zhang Deqin asked her fiancé to bring some people to clean up Tan Xiu. Her fiancé was an instructor of the Rising Dragon Martial School, but in the end he failed to clean up Tan Xiu and was instead beaten up by Tan Xiu. He was even sent to the Rising Dragon Martial School and humiliated them. Finally, the schoolmaster of the Rising Dragon Martial School compensated him with 100 million yuan. Only then did the matter come to an end. Later on, in order to retaliate against Tan Xiu, Zhang Deqin spent money to hire 3 foreign assassins from abroad. But in the end, she failed to kill Tan Xiu and died outside Southgate Town. The 7 or 8 major shareholders of the Hu Group who were present all revealed horrified expressions. They had heard about the murder outside the Southgate Town, but they had never thought that it would turn out to be like this. Hu Xinmin's expression turned extremely unsightly at this moment. His body slightly shivered a few times before he took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Where's that Tan Xiu? Hu Wanjun said, He seems to be in one of the private rooms on this floor. Take me to see him, said Hu Xinmin in a deep voice. Dad, Hu Wanjun hurriedly shouted. Hu Xinmin shouted in a deep voice, Go! Hu Wanjun quickly lowered his head and walked out of the private room. All right. The waiter turned around and left the private room. Quickly, Hu Xinmin entered the private room with Hu Wanjun. His eyes only glanced at Chen Wei and then fell on Tan Xiu. He walked a few steps and came before Tan Xiu. With a smile on his face, he said, I've long heard of Mr. Tang's great name. Today I finally see you. You're really young and promising. I'm Hu Xinmin, the patriarch of the Hu family. Looking at his outstretched hand, Tan Xiu simply ignored it and lightly said, I know your purpose in coming here. Compensate me and leave. Hu Xinmin's face turned stiff and he finally retracted his hand in embarrassment. He took out a check and put it on the table in front of Tan Xiu. He forced a smile and said, Mr. Tang, my son is insensible and presumptuously offended you and your friend. I hope you can forgive him. Here's 21 million yuan and your bank card. There's a total of 22 million yuan. Consider it our Hu family's apology to you. I hope you don't think it's too little. Tan Xiu calmly nodded and said, I know. Your Hu family signed an agreement with the Zhangs and suffered a lot of losses. But I advise you to befriend someone with good intentions. Just like disciplining your son, don't let him run amok by relying on his family background. Sometimes, a trivial matter can implicate the whole family, just like the Zhang siblings. All right, that's all I have to say. You can leave now. Hu Xinmin's pupils shrunk. Tan Xiu's words made a monstrous wave rise in his heart. Before, he was not sure whether Tan Xiu was the mastermind behind the conspiracy against the Zhangs. But he even knew the secret agreement signed by the Hu family and the Zhangs. It was very likely that the Zhangs had fallen into his hands and would also be destroyed by him. Yes, I understand. Hu Xinmin said with an obsequious smile. Subsequently, he fiercely glared at the pale Hu Wanjun and turned to leave the box. At this moment, Chen Wei was dumbfounded. She never dreamed that what Tan Xiu said turned out to be true. Not only did the other party really come to compensate them, but the price was also twice as high as Tan Xiu's. When only Tan Xiu and Chen Wei were left in the box, Chen Wei quickly grabbed the check and carefully examined it. Then, she said with an inconceivable expression, "The Hu family really came to compensate us? And the Hu family's patriarch? Also, didn't you ask them to compensate 11 million? How could they compensate you 22 million? That Hu Xinmin is sensible," Tan Xiu said with a faint smile. "I'll forget about this matter. Give me your bank card and I'll transfer 2 million to you for the medical expenses. The rest is mine." Chen Wei stared blankly for a moment. Then, she immediately shook her head and said, No. I don't want it. They didn't really want to compensate me. It's all because of you." "I take back my previous words," Tan Xiu said with a smile. "What words?" Chen Wei was confused. "My IQ is a sore point," Tan Xiu said. Chen Wei stared blankly for a moment. Then, she couldn't help but laugh and scolded, "Are you courting death? You even dare to cut at me. But what's your identity? You can even make the patriarch of a big family come to apologize in person? He even put on a look as if he's afraid that you won't give up. Also, is that Zhang family you mentioned very powerful?" "I'm just me, an ordinary high school graduate," Tan Xiu said with a faint smile. "As for why I came to apologize, it's because I did something wrong and I know how to repent." "You're very honest. I hope you won't ask about the Zhang family again. I hope you can forget everything I said today." Chen Wei curled her lips and said with dissatisfaction, "If you don't want to say it, then this young lady doesn't want to ask." Knock, knock. The private room's door was knocked. Tan Xiu followed the sound and immediately saw Long Zhengyu with his arms crossed, leaning on the door with a smile. With a smile, Tan Xiu waved and asked, "How did you know that I'm having dinner here?" "You made such a big commotion, how could I not know?" Long Zhengyu said with a smile. "Don't make trouble. Just say it," Tan Xiu said with a snappy expression. Long Zhengyu said with a smile, "I just happened to bump into Hu Xinmin. His face was very black. He looks like a charcoal bag. I greeted him and found out that his son, Hu Wanjun, has offended you, so he just came to compensate you." Tan Xiu let out an indifferent smile and said, "Heaven's sins can be forgiven, but one's own sins cannot be avoided. This Hu Xinmin is quite flexible, so I'll just forget about this matter. Have you had dinner? If not, let's eat together?" With a bit of curiosity, Long Zhengyu's eyes fell on Chen Wei and asked, "This is, just consider her as a passerby, eh?" said Tan Xiu. "I'm afraid you won't see her again for the rest of your life after tomorrow, so don't ask any more. You're the passerby, eh?" 4 chapters will be released today. This is the first chapter. Chapter 212. Chen Wei muttered with dissatisfaction. She then stood up and extended her hand to Long Zhengyu and said with a smile, "Hello, handsome. I'm Chen Wei. You can call me Wei Wei." "Hello, Wei Wei." Long Zhengyu and Chen Wei shook hands, but he felt Chen Wei's little finger tickling his palm. Suddenly, his expression turned slightly blank. Tan Xiu was keenly aware of Long Zhengyu's expression. He stared at Chen Wei with a funny and angry expression and said, "Hey, don't provoke him. His woman can circle around the entire Star City several times. Also, restrain yourself and don't fool around everywhere, lest you get infected with diseases later." Chen Wei said with dissatisfaction, "Tan Xiu, how can you tear down my words like this? No matter what, aren't we friends who share weal and woe together?" "Share weal and woe together?" Tan Xiu was flabbergasted. "When did we share weal and woe together?" Chen Wei said with justice, "Last night at the bar. And also at the hotel." Tan Xiu rolled his eyes and snappily said, "How can that be considered as sharing weal and woe? You really have a lot of fallacious reasoning and heresy. Long Zhengyu, why are you still staring blankly? If you haven't eaten yet, then come and eat with us. If you have, then go busy yourself. In fact, Long Zhengyu had already eaten and didn't intend to stay for dinner. However, Chen Wei's character, as well as her relationship with Tan Xiu, aroused his interest. He immediately pulled a chair, sat down and said with a smile, "Did you two get a room at the hotel last night? Miss Wei Wei is very lucky, but also very unlucky." "What do you mean by that?" Chen Wei asked with a puzzled expression. Long Zhengyu said with a smile, "I said you're lucky. It's because I've never heard of any woman who can make Tan Xiu worship her skirt. Unlucky means that you have a lot of competitors, and each and every one of them is very outstanding. Some of them even make my heart beat endlessly." Chen Wei incredulously said, "He also has women who like him? What kind of joke is this? Other than pretending to be cool, this guy has a venomous tongue. How can women like him?" Long Zhengyu smiled and said, "Speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. There's a great beauty in the private room 2 rooms away from this one. She couldn't wait to devote herself to him." Chen Wei quickly asked, "Which way?" Long Zhengyu said. Chen Wei pulled out the chair and quickly ran out of the private room. Seeing this, Tan Xiu immediately shouted, "Hey, hey, hey, where are you going? Stop fooling around and come back to eat." However, Chen Wei simply ignored him. After leaving the room, she ran towards the left side of the corridor. Tan Xiu turned around, glared at Long Zhengyu and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? That girl was a weirdo. I was asked to take care of her for 2 days. Ah, right, she just came back from abroad and arrived in Star City last night. Originally, she wanted to seek shelter with her friend, but her friend had something to do, so she left me to take care of her." Long Zhengyu asked curiously, "Which friend of yours? Why are you so concerned about it?" With a helpless expression, Tan Xiu said, "Forget it. I'll tell you the truth. She's a friend of my 3rd year's class teacher." "So that's how it is?" Long Zhengyu said with a smile, "You're innately indifferent. Wanting to be your friend is as difficult as ascending to the blue sky. I was wondering who would have the ability to be your friend." That's right. I heard that your class teacher is a great beauty." Tan Xiu said, "What else do you have in your eyes other than beautiful women?" Long Zhengyu deliberately pretended to be affectionate and said in a soft voice, "You're still in my eyes. Go to hell." Tan Xiu shuddered and snappily scolded with a smile. In another private room, Kong Xia was accompanying several city leaders to have a meal. Jack used his witty and humorous Mandarin to amuse the city leaders, making them laugh heartily. The wine in their glasses also quickly went down. "I'm sorry, you can't go in," the waiter's voice sounded. While speaking, Chen Wei had squeezed into the private room. When she looked at the people at the table, her eyes finally fell on Kong Xia's face. She suddenly looked stunned. Beautiful. Really beautiful. She had seen countless beautiful women, but never one more beautiful than this one. Even her good sister, Han Qingwu, was inferior to her. But why does this super beauty look familiar? Chen Wei shook her head. She didn't believe that Kong Xia knew Tan Xiu. After all, Tan Xiu was like a toad looking up at a white swan in front of Kong Xia. However, in order to confirm whether Long Zhengyu's words were true or not, she still asked, "Beauty, do you know Tan Xiu?" Kong Xia was disgusted by the sudden intrusion of this strange woman. She was about to ask Chen Wei about something when she suddenly heard the other party's question. She immediately stood up and waved to the waiter, asking, "I know him and you are?" Chen Wei was surprised. "Are you sure you know him? The Tan Xiu I'm talking about is quite young, only about 20 years old. He's also a student who just took the college entrance test." Kong Xia affirmed, "The one you're talking about should be the same person as the one I know." Chen Wei incredulously said, "Could it be that what Long Zhengyu said is true? You like Tan Xiu? You're his suitor?" Kong Xia looked at Chen Wei with a strange expression. After a few seconds of silence, she probingly asked, "Did Long Zhengyu also say that Tan Xiu heard about it?" Chen Wei said, "That fellow Tan Xiu. He's a dead duck with a stubborn mouth. How could he admit it?" Kong Xia secretly heaved a sigh of relief. A smile appeared on her face as she turned to the several leaders at the table and said with a smile, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have some private matters to deal with. You drink first." Jack, accompany these leaders well. If you can't let them drink to their heart's content, I won't forgive you. Okay, Jack said with a smile. Kang Xia faintly smiled and left the box with Chen Wei. She then asked in the corridor outside, is Tan Xiu also in the Long's dining hall? Chen Wei nodded. Yes. He's the one who brought me here. Kang Xia said with a smile, let me introduce myself. I'm Kang Xia, the general manager of the magnificent Tang Corporation. Can I trouble you to take me to see him? Chen Wei curiously said, why do I feel that your name is somewhat familiar? I seem to have heard it somewhere. Kang Xia said with a smile, there are many people who have heard my name. It's just an ordinary name. Chen Wei shook her head and suppressed the suspicion in her eyes. Then she said, let's go. I'll take you to see him. Long Zhengyu said that there are many beauties who like Tan Xiu, and there's one in the box next to him. I didn't believe it at first. But after seeing you, I believe it. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Thank you for the compliment. Kang Xia faintly smiled. As they arrived at the box where Tan Xiu was, Kang Xia looked at Tan Xiu, who was chatting with Long Zhengyu. She then said with a smile, Boss, I didn't disturb your meal, did I? Tan Xiu said with a smile, I just heard from Long Zhengyu that you invited several city leaders to drink in the box next door. Did you drink too much? Kang Xia said with a smile, I still have work in the afternoon, so I drank very little. It's Jack who accompanied them. Tan Xiu nodded and said, give me a few years. I guarantee that I won't need you to accompany them when we do business in the future. Other people will also beg to give us convenience. Also, if someone dares to disrespect you, you don't need to give them any face. Just directly slap them. If anyone dares to cause trouble behind our back, tell me and I'll deal with it. Kang Xia said with a smile, having a boss like you makes me really happy. Wait. Chen Wei appeared in front of Kang Xia. Her hands stretched out between Tan Xiu and Kang Xia as she said with an incredulous expression, Chief Kang, what did you just call him? Boss? You said you're the general manager of the magnificent Tang Corporation. Doesn't that mean he's the big boss of the magnificent Tang Corporation? Kang Xia nodded and said with a smile, he's the big boss of the magnificent Tang Corporation. Chen Wei looked at the two in shock. After hesitating for a moment, she then asked, so, how much is the total assets of the magnificent Tang Corporation? Kang Xia shook her head and said, it's a trade secret. It's not convenient to tell you. Chen Wei looked at Tan Xiu and said aloud, you tell me. Tan Xiu didn't directly answer Chen Wei's question, but looked at Kang Xia and asked, that matter should be almost over, right? How much money did we get? Kang Xia said, it's almost done. What should be dealt with has been dealt with, and we'll get what we should get in the near future. The amount we got should be about 4 billion yuan. With a satisfied expression, Tan Xiu said, using 200 million yuan to earn 4 billion yuan. It's worth it. Chen Wei looked at the two in shock. Her mouth was opened so wide that even a big goose egg could be stuffed into her mouth. Who are you? Chen Wei looked at Tan Xiu and called out. Long Zhengyu said with a sour expression, didn't he say it? He's the big boss of the magnificent Tang Corporation. I can guarantee that with the famous Kang Xia working for him, the total assets of the magnificent Tang Corporation will definitely increase by 100 or even 1,000 times in the future. Maybe he can even surpass Bill Gates in the future. Chen Wei blinked. Suddenly, her body shook and nearly fell to the floor. With a shocked expression, she looked at Kang Xia and exclaimed, I remember you. Heavens! Are you the world-famous financial genius from Wall Street, Kang Xia? I don't dare to say that I'm world-famous, but I'm really from Wall Street. Kang Xia said with a smile. Chen Wei staggered as she walked to her original seat and sat down. She covered her chest with her hand and was unable to speak for a long time. She had received too many shocks today. These shocks were not all because of Kang Xia, but because of Tan Xiu. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect that the guy who had accompanied her for a long time and was even ridiculed by her turned out to have such a terrifying identity. Who was Kang Xia? She was the most dazzling genius in the financial world, an outstanding talent that countless super consortiums wanted to poach. Yet, She unexpectedly returned to China and even became Tan Xiu's subordinate. That's right. Long Zhengyu just said that Kang Xia was interested in Tan Xiu? Could it be true? Tan Xiu felt that Chen Wei's reaction was a bit unreasonable. However, he didn't say anything in front of Kang Xia and Long Zhengyu. Instead, he said to Kang Xia, "Do you still need to socialize there? If not, go back and rest early." Kang Xia said, "The socializing hasn't ended yet. I asked Jack to accompany me there. However, it's not convenient for me to leave for too long, so I'll go back first." "All right." Tan Xiu nodded. Chapter 213. Lunch was over. Tan Xiu and Long Zhengyu separated as he took Chen Wei to a nearby bank. He deposited the 20 million check and gave the other 2 million to Chen Wei, who refused to take it no matter what. They left the bank. As the two of them stood on the busy street, Tan Xiu asked with a smile, "You've eaten and earned the money. Can you obediently stay in the hotel this afternoon? I still have some things to deal with, so I'm afraid I don't have much time to accompany you." "Where are you going?" Chen Wei asked. Tan Xiu said, "I'm going to take care of some serious business." Chen Wei hesitated for a moment before she finally nodded and said, "Then go. I'll go back to the hotel myself. Tonight, will you accompany me to have dinner?" Tan Xiu said, "If you can promise me to stay in the hotel, I won't come over. I'll come over at noon tomorrow. Han Qingwu will return to Star City at noon tomorrow. I'll hand you over to her and my task will be done." Chen Wei's expression was a bit complicated as she said, "You're so anxious to hand me over to Han Qingwu?" Tan Xiu said with a smile, "You're good sisters, so I naturally want you to see each other earlier." Chen Wei said, "If you don't accompany me, I'll run everywhere." Tan Xiu stared blankly for a moment before he forced a smile and shook his head. The following day, Chen Wei was like a dogskin plaster. No matter what Tan Xiu said, she wouldn't let Tan Xiu leave. Even at night, she didn't let Tan Xiu return to Southgate Town and accompanied her in the hotel. She said that she was afraid after what happened last night. Tan Xiu was so angry that he almost knocked her out again. The next day at noon, when Tan Xiu received a call from Han Qingwu, Chen Wei was eating and drinking in the food street. When Han Qingwu arrived, Tan Xiu said straightforwardly, "Miss Han, please don't look for me for this kind of hard work later. All right, my mission is complete. I'll take my leave first." Han Qingwu quickly pulled Tang Xiu and was at a loss whether she had to cry or laugh as she said, "Tang Xiu, isn't it just accompanying Chen Wei for 2 days? Why do you look so bitter and hateful? Did this guy harass you? I know her personality. She has evil intentions but no guts. Until now, she has never had a boyfriend." Tang Xiu rolled his eyes at her and snappily said, "She's got a big evil heart. If I hadn't caused a ruckus, I'm afraid that she would have kidnapped a pretty girl to a hotel to have fun." Han Qingwu couldn't help laughing and said, "Did she tell you that she's bisexual? Don't listen to her nonsense. Her sexual orientation is normal." Tan Xiu was surprised for a moment. Looking at Chen Wei, who was engrossed in eating, he almost wanted to tear her mouth apart. A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea. "Farewell." After saying that, Tan Xiu strode away. Looking at Tan Xiu's back, Han Qingwu forced a smile and shook her head. She turned her head and sat opposite to Chen Wei. Then, she said with a smile, "What did you do? Why did you torture him like this?" Chen Wei looked up, but the direction she looked at was Tan Xiu's back as he left. A trace of reluctance flashed in her eyes. She raised her hand to cover her forehead and brushed her long hair. After concealing it, she pretended to be calm and said, "I'm not a tigress. What can I do to him? This student of yours is not simple. He's simply a god. If he didn't knock me out the night before yesterday, I would have been able to eat, drink, and earn money with him. It would have been a very pleasant life." Han Qingwu looked at Chen Wei with a strange expression. She suddenly had a feeling that these 2 days were very wonderful for her. However, her complexion changed when she heard that Tan Xiu hit someone. "Wei Wei, did Tan Xiu hit you? He even knocked you out?" That guy was very heavy-handed. Chen Wei snorted. Han Qingwu asked. "He's a dog that bites Lu Dongbin. He doesn't know how to appreciate people's kindness." It was so dangerous the night before yesterday. I was kind enough to... Along with her narration, Han Qingwu figured out the whole story. Even though she was experienced and knowledgeable, she was still shocked by Han Qingwu's description and was speechless for a long time. You mean? Tan Xiao originally wanted the police to disturb the bar business so that you could go back to the hotel and rest. But then he found someone selling drugs? Then he followed the clues to the Caesar Grand Hotel? A gunfight happened? And a lot of people died? That's right. The real-life version is more wonderful. Chen Wei said, "That's right. That Tang brat didn't listen to my advice. Not only did he knock me out, but he also went out to act like a hero. Fortunately, he's all right. Otherwise, I would have taken care of him instead of him." A trace of envy appeared on Han Qingwu's face as she said, "You're living a wonderful life. Had I known earlier, I wouldn't have gone to Shanghai. By the way, you just said that you can eat, drink, and make money. What do you mean by that?" Upon hearing this, a bright smile immediately appeared on Chen Wei's face. She burped and said, "I can't tell you the specifics because I promised Tan Xiao that I won't tell anyone about him. But let me tell you something. This student of yours is really amazing. Even though I've been in the US for so many years and have seen countless geniuses, and geniuses, none of them is more amazing than him. Just wait. He'll definitely radiate golden light all over his body in the future. He'll be as dazzling as a god in armor." Han Qingwu couldn't help but laugh. She then said with a smile, "Wei Wei, you're not describing a big shot. You're describing a bridegroom. Tell me honestly, don't tell me that you've taken a fancy to my student?" Chen Wei rubbed her belly and jokingly said, "Indeed, I've taken a fancy to him. If I marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If I marry a dog, follow the dog. I'll also call you Miss Han later. Get lost, haha." After laughing for a while, Han Qingwu asked, "Wei Wei, you haven't answered my question yet?" Chen Wei stopped laughing and said with a pointed expression, "I'll answer one question about this topic. If you really want to know the rest, you can find your student yourself." With a puzzled expression, Han Qingwu asked, "Which one should I answer?" Chen Wei said, "Answer how powerful he is. Let's put it this way. Is your Star City's Long's dining hall a very high-class hotel?" With all seriousness, Han Qingwu said, "If it dares to say that it's second, then there will be no first." Chen Wei said, "Tan Xiao is a member of the Long's dining hall, a VIP character. As for the rest, you can imagine it yourself." "Tan Xiao? A member of the Long's dining hall?" Han Qingwu said with an inconceivable expression, "Are you kidding me? Tan Xiao is just a student, and his family condition is not particularly good. How could he get the membership of the Long's dining hall? Wei Wei, you must be joking with me." Chen Wei raised two fingers and guaranteed, "If I'm lying, I have no other choice but to marry you in this life." Nonsense. Han Qingwu was amused and laughed. At Star City Airport, after bidding farewell to Han Qingwu and Chen Wei, Tan Xiao rushed here by car. Yesterday, he had an appointment with someone to buy wintertide fluorites and star fragment stones in Tianjin City. Since there were still 2 hours before the flight departure, Tan Xiao casually found a coffee shop to drink coffee and kill time. However, he inadvertently found a sneaky woman wearing a sun hat, big black sunglasses, and a black trench coat, who was quietly sneaking into the coffee shop. "Ha!" Tan Xiao's expression suddenly moved. He found that this woman looked like a certain female singer. Moreover, it was a very famous female singer. Zhang Xinya? After the woman entered the coffee shop, she looked around and her eyes locked on an empty seat next to Tan Xiao. Because it was a corner of the coffee shop, it was relatively remote and very quiet. "Miss, what would you like to order?" The waiter asked politely. A silvery bell-like voice came from the woman's mouth. "A cup of mocha, please." "Thank you." "Please wait a moment." The waiter replied and then turned around to leave. Tan Xiao looked at the woman and gently took off her big sunglasses. He immediately recognized her. She was indeed the popular female singer in Asia, Zhang Xinya, who was heading to the international stage. He was not a groupie. Although Zhang Xinya's face was extremely beautiful, he only looked at her for a while before he lowered his head and took out his mobile. Recently, he found that using a mobile phone to surf the internet was very convenient. Not only could he read all kinds of news, but he could also search for the knowledge he wanted to know. 10 minutes later, when Tan Xiao was playing with his mobile, the silvery bell-like voice sounded again. "Sir, can I borrow your mobile? I want to make a call." Tan Xiao looked up and found that Zhang Xinya had come to the sofa opposite him with a cup of coffee in her hand. After a moment of silence, Tan Xiao lightly said, "If you want my mobile number, I'm sorry, but it's not convenient to give it to a stranger. If you really want to answer the phone, 100 yuan per minute." I'm not interested in your mobile number," Zhang Xinya angrily said. "I just want to borrow your mobile. Aren't you ripping me off?" "You're wrong," Tan Xiao said. "My mobile is my personal item, and there are many things inside that need to be kept confidential. It's not convenient for others to see it. You need to pay a price if you want to borrow my mobile. Do you think 100 yuan is too much? You're talking nonsense," Zhang Xinya angrily said. "The things you need to keep confidential are useless to me. Also, don't tell me you don't know me. Do you think I should know you?" Tan Xiao asked back. "You really don't know me?" Zhang Xinya asked incredulously. "Are you going to use your mobile or not?" Tan Xiao snappily said. Zhang Xinya was speechless. Ever since she joined the entertainment company at the age of 18, she had gained a resounding reputation for 6 years. Her songs were very pleasant to listen to, and her extremely beautiful appearance attracted a large number of fans. She was very confident that 99% of the people in China, whether it was a few years old or an old man in his 70s or 80s, had seen her appearance, whether it was on TV, the internet, or even other media channels. Did this guy come from the mountains? Even if he came from the mountains, he should have some masculine reaction to a beautiful woman like me, right? Zhang Xinya was just observing Tan Xiao. What surprised her was that Tan Xiao's eyes were very clear, just like a newborn child without any impurities. He didn't have the lust that other men had when they saw her. Chapter 214. Zhang Xinya took a deep breath to suppress the anger in her heart and said, "I agree. 100 yuan per minute. Lend me your cell phone." Here. Tan Xiao handed over the phone. Zhang Xinya took it and got up. She walked a few steps to the side and quickly dialed a cell number. After whispering a few words to the other party, she hung up the phone. Just as she was about to return to her seat, she suddenly rolled her eyes. Recalling the secret of the phone that Tan Xiao had just told her, she immediately checked the phone's content. 2 minutes later, just as she flipped through the call log, a few familiar names caught her eye. Ouyang Lulu? Chen Zhizhong? Tui? Bai Tao? She remembered Ouyang Lulu's cell number very clearly. When she opened the phone number and saw the number, an incredulous look appeared on her face. The number was, really? Zhang Xinya turned her head and carefully observed Tan Xiao. Then she returned to the opposite side of Tan Xiao. After sitting down, she shook the phone in her hand and asked, "What's your name?" Tan Xiao said lightly, "You should introduce yourself politely before asking someone's name." Zhang Xinya's breath stagnated. She then forced a smile and said, "You're really a freak. Forget it. Let me introduce myself. I'm Zhang Xinya, a singer. What about you?" "I'm Tan Xiao, a student." Zhang Xinya said, "You don't look old, so you should be a student. But how do you know Ouyang Lulu? She's from Jingmen Island. Are you also from there?" "No, we're just friends," said Tan Xiao. Zhang Xinya curiously asked, "You and Ouyang Lulu are friends? How come I've never heard of you?" Zhang Xinya asked curiously. Maybe I'm not that important in her heart, so she's not interested in talking about me. Well, the question time is over. Shouldn't you return my phone to me? Also, you just used 4 minutes, so 400 yuan. Thank you. Zhang Xinya returned the phone to Tan Xiao. After hesitating for a moment, she whispered, Let's discuss something, shall we? I'm Ouyang Lulu's friend and you're also Ouyang Lulu's friend. Forget about the money. Since we've gotten to know each other, it can be considered fate." Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "That's a different matter. Pay up." Zhang Xinya said angrily, "Why are you so obsessed with money?" Tan Xiao said, "Money is a good thing. It can be used to buy food, drink, and clothes. It can also be used to support parents, wives, and children. Stop, stop, stop. Zhang Xinya didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who doesn't know that money is a good thing? But we are all Ouyang Lulu's friends. Moreover, I also know Bai Tao and Chu. That's right, I also know the Endless Virtue Pharmaceuticals' big boss, Chen Zhizhong. There are so many layers of relationship between us, let's just skip the money. What was that saying again? A friend of a friend is also a friend. Since we are friends, talking about money will hurt our relationship. Tan Xiu was so angry that he laughed. We have feelings for each other? Zhang Xinya was speechless. Tan Xiu said, don't try to claim friendship with me. You still have to pay up. Hurry up. Zhang Xinya angrily glared at Tan Xiu and said with a forced smile, I don't have money. I lost my wallet and luggage. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come here to hide. Are you trying to renege on your debt? Tan Xiu asked. Do you think I'm the kind of person who would renege on a debt? Zhang Xinya angrily said. Judging from your current behavior, I think you are. Tan Xiu said with a deadpan expression. Zhang Xinya gasped for a few heavy breaths due to Tan Xiu's words. She thought for a moment and then stretched out her hand and said, Give me your cell phone again. I need to make a phone call. You haven't given me the money, why should I lend you my cell phone? Tan Xiu said. You just peeped at my cell phone and I haven't settled the account with you. Zhang Xinya angrily said, Who wants to peep at your cell phone? Hurry up. Lend me your phone if you want the money. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment and then handed over his cell phone again. Zhang Xinya took the cell phone and directly found Ouyang Lulu's number and dialed it. A few seconds later, Ouyang Lulu's voice came out of the phone. Because Zhang Xinya turned on the loudspeaker, Tan Xiu could hear it. Honey, do you miss me? I actually miss you too. Can't we be considered as having a telepathic connection? Zhang Xinya was dumbfounded. Tan Xiu also rolled his eyes helplessly. Cough, cough. Zhang Xinya coughed a few times and probed, Lulu, I'm Zhang Xinya. Xinya? You? Why are you using Tan Xiu's cell phone to call me? You're so shameful. Don't take my words seriously. I'm just joking. Ouyang Lulu's shocked and embarrassed groan came out of the phone. Zhang Xinya said with a charming smile, Don't worry. We're good sisters, I won't laugh at you. But, do you really know this Tan Xiu? From your words, you're very familiar with him? Ouyang Lulu said, Yes, I'm very familiar with him. I know which direction his bed is facing. Her words suddenly came to an abrupt halt. It was because she found that the meaning behind her words was very easy to be misunderstood. A strange expression was revealed on Zhang Xinya's face. She looked at Tan Xiu a few times and then said with a smile, Since you're so familiar with each other, he'll definitely give you face, right? He will definitely give you face, right? Do me a favor, I just borrowed his phone and got ripped off by him. Can you help me ask him if I can pay him the money I owe him later? Ouyang Lulu was ashamed and angry. Zhang Xinya, don't talk nonsense. Tan Xiu and I are pure friends. But how do you know each other? Also, where are you now? Zhang Xinya said, Star City Airport. We met by chance. Ouyang Lulu was surprised and asked, What did Tan Xiu do at the airport? Zhang Xinya said, You ask me, how would I know? Hurry up and tell him that the money you owe him will be paid later. Ouyang Lulu said with a charming smile, Then give his cell phone back to him. I'll talk to him. Zhang Xinya directly handed the cell phone to Tan Xiu and said, You tell him. Tan Xiu took the cell phone and rolled his eyes at Zhang Xinya, saying, Ouyang Lulu, can you pay attention to your words later? Don't let others misunderstand you. Also, I heard what you just said. Since she's really your friend, then forget it. Alright, I'll hang up if there's nothing else. Ouyang Lulu quickly called out, Wait. How come you're at Star City Airport? Are you coming to Jingmen Island? If you're coming, I'll go to Jingmen Island Airport and wait for you. No, I'm going to Tianjin City. Tan Xiu said. Ouyang Lulu was puzzled and asked, Why are you going to Tianjin City? Is there something good going on? It's a good thing. I'm going to buy something. Tan Xiu said. Ouyang Lulu hesitated and said, Do you want me to go with you? Tan Xiao snappily said, You're in Jingmen Island and I'm in Star City. How can you go with me? All right, you're busy with our business. Tell me the results as soon as you're done. That's right. Remember to contact Kong Xia after you come here. She's in charge of all the business matters. She can make any decision on behalf of me. Ouyang Lulu cried out, Can I not see her? That woman doesn't have good intentions toward you. Tan Xiao was puzzled and asked, Why does she have bad intentions toward me? Ouyang Lulu hesitated for a moment and hummed, In any case, I think she has some bad intentions by following you. This woman is capable and not worse than me, but she's too hypocritical. Tan Xiao couldn't help laughing and said, Why do I feel that you're like concubines fighting for favor in the harem? All right, I'll stop talking. I'll board the plane soon. Zhang Xinya, who was sitting in front of Tan Xiao, listened to their conversation. She was keenly aware that her good sister absolutely liked Tan Xiao. She had known Ouyang Lulu for 7 or 8 years, but this was the first time she saw her like a little girl talking to a man. After seeing Tan Xiao hang up the phone, she suddenly had a bit of interest in Tan Xiao. She asked excitedly, I didn't expect that even my good sister, who is so proud that her tail is wagging, has a special liking for you. Tan Xiao, what are you going to do in Tianjin City? I also want to go there, but it's a pity that I've lost my identity documents. Otherwise, I could go with you. Tan Xiao said, Don't. Your identity is too eye-catching. I'm used to being low-key and I don't like to be stared at wherever I go. Zhang Xinya was speechless. She really didn't know what to say about Tan Xiao, this weirdo. Tan Xiao got up and said, All right, I'm going to board the plane soon, so I'll go first. After saying that, he took out 200 yuan from his wallet and put it on the table, saying, I've paid for your coffee. If we meet again in this life, remember to pay me back. Wait. Zhang Xinya was quite satisfied after seeing Tan Xiao's performance. She got up and asked, Can I ask you one last question? Go ahead. Tan Xiao said, I just saw Chen Zhizhong's number in your phone. Are you familiar with him? Zhang Xinya said. Not bad. Tan Xiao said. Zhang Xinya hesitated and said, Since you're familiar with him, can you do me a favor? I'm looking for him for something urgent, but I haven't been able to see him. He seems to be very busy recently. Even if I make an appointment with him, I'll have to wait for many days. Don't you know him? Tan Xiao asked. Just call him directly. Zhang Xinya forced a smile and said, I did, and he picked it up. But he said that he's busy now. Why are you looking for him? Tan Xiao asked again. I know that the Endless Virtue Pharmaceutical is in the Chinese herbal medicine business. I need a very precious Chinese herbal medicine, and I hope to buy it from him. I won't hide it from you. It's actually a strange disease that my father needs to be treated with. What kind of medicinal herb? Tan Xiao asked. River snake single. Zhang Xinya said. Tan Xiao's expression moved as he was surprised and said, This herb is very important for treating virtual fire deficiency syndrome. Could it be that your father is suffering from virtual fire deficiency syndrome? Today's 4th update is over. It's approaching the end of the month. Many brothers and sisters must have accumulated a lot of monthly votes. I'm weekly begging for a monthly vote to support _. Chapter 215. A surprised expression appeared on Zhang Xinya's beautiful face. She didn't expect that Tan Xiao would be able to guess her father's illness just by saying the name of a medicinal herb. Could it be? He's a divine doctor? Just as this thought emerged in her mind, it was immediately expelled from her mind. If someone else was a divine doctor, she might believe it. But to say that Tan Xiao was a divine doctor, she wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. After all, Tan Xiao was too young, and those Chinese medicine practitioners who were proficient in Chinese medicine were all old. It's virtual fire syndrome. Zhang Xinya nodded bitterly. Tan Xiao said, River serpent single is a good medicine to treat virtual fire syndrome. The effect will be better if it's matched with silver bluegrass. Forget it. Since Ouyang Lulu spoke for you, I'll help you to the end. After saying that, he dialed Chen Zhizhong's cell number. Master, are you looking for me? Chen Zhizhong's voice came from the phone. Tan Xiao asked, There's something I need to talk to you about. Do you know Zhang Xinya? I know her, Chen Zhizhong said. Tan Xiao said, she needs river serpent single. She needs a creeping snake list. Help her look for it. Give her a discount on the price. She's Ouyang Lulu's friend. All right, I'll contact her later, Chen Zhizhong said without hesitation. She's with me now. Tell her now. Tan Xiao said. After saying that, Tan Xiao handed the phone to Zhang Xinya and lightly said, it's Chen Zhizhong's call. You talk. Zhang Xinya was pleasantly surprised. She thanked him gratefully, took the phone and said, hello, I'm Zhang Xinya. Are you Uncle Chen? Chen Zhizhong said, it's me. My master has just told me about the situation. I'll go all out to find this medicinal herb called river serpent single. Once I find it, I'll immediately inform you. Your master? Zhang Xinya was dumbfounded. A confused look hung in her eyes as she subconsciously asked. Chen Zhizhong said with a smile, so you don't know that the owner of this phone is my master. All right, this matter is settled. Help me convey my regards to master. I won't be talking to him anymore. All right, Zhang Xinya replied and then heard the busy tone from the phone. A shocked expression hung on her face as she looked at Tang Xiao as though she was looking at an alien. Master? Tan Xiao is Chen Zhizhong's master? Oh my God! How was this possible? Who was Chen Zhizhong? He was the Endless Virtue Pharmaceuticals' big boss, a multimillionaire with a net worth of tens of billions. With his status and identity, how could he acknowledge a young man in his 20s as his master? Zhang Xinya swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked with a trembling voice, Tan Xiao, are you really Chen Zhizhong, Boss Chen's master? Is there a problem? Tan Xiao asked calmly. Zhang Xinya shook her head like a rattle drum. She waved her hand and said, no problem, of course. I'm just a little shocked. By the way, thank you so much. Without your call, I'm afraid it would be very difficult for me to meet Boss Chen. You're welcome, Tan Xiao said with a faint smile. As long as you don't speak ill of me in front of Ouyang Lulu when you see her later, I'll be satisfied. Well, I've done what I can. I still have to catch the plane, so I'll take my leave first. I'll see you off. Zhang Xinya quickly said. Tan Xiao stopped her and said straightforwardly, I don't want tomorrow's news headline to be big singer Zhang Xinya secretly dating a mysterious young man at the airport. So, stay here. Having said that, then he carried his black travel bag and walked toward the boarding gate. Zhang Xinya stared blankly at Tan Xiao's back as he left. Her heart was filled with all sorts of emotions, sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, and salty. She never dared to dream that she would encounter such a bizarre thing in her life, and meet such a strange person. Originally, this was just a chance encounter due to a combination of factors. She lost her luggage and borrowed a mobile phone. But unexpectedly, she accomplished her purpose of coming to Star City, and even met her good sister's friend, who seemed to have high attainments in Chinese medicine. Tianjin City. Because it was close to the imperial capital, Tianjin City's development speed was exceptionally fast. High-rise buildings stood in great numbers, row upon row of shops with a dazzling lineup of goods. The traffic network extended in all directions, and the endless stream of traffic converged into a dragon. It was already close to evening when Tan Xiao arrived at Tianjin City. He dialed the mysterious old man's phone number at the airport and asked for the address, and then hurried to the Tianjin City Antique Trading Market. Ancient Gate of the Wasteland. The strange name of the shop, and the gloomy decoration style of the shop. Tan Xiao carried his travel bag and stepped into the most remote shop in the antique trading market. An oppressive feeling floated in his heart. Black beams, black walls, and even the furniture inside were all composed of black. Only the rows of antiques and antiques on the black shelves could be seen in other colors. At this moment, aside from two customers who were looking at the antiques and antiques on the first floor of the shop, there wasn't even a staff member. Tan Xiao was secretly surprised. Was the owner of this shop not afraid that customers would steal the things in the shop? However, in order to find the old man who spoke to him on the phone as soon as possible, he immediately released his divine sense and found 3 people in a private room on the second floor. Apart from an old man with a head full of white hair and reading glasses, there was also a middle-aged man and a woman. The three of them were staring at an exquisitely carved coffin on the table in front of them. It was a foot long and half a foot high. That is, Tan Xiu's pupils shrank. Using his divine sense, his attention was focused on the coffin. He didn't expect to see demon stones on Earth. Demon stones were essential treasures for demonic cultivators in the devil world. They contained a large amount of demonic power, which could be absorbed and refined into one's own cultivation and could improve one's strength. It was the same as the immortal stones in the immortal world. Immortals could absorb the immortal power in the immortal stones and refine it to improve their own strength. Get it? Tang Xiu's eyes flashed with brilliance. If it were an immortal stone, it would have a mediocre effect on Tan Xiu. But demon stones were different. The heavenly art of cosmic genesis he cultivated was, in fact, a cultivation technique to shape a demon god's divine body. If he could absorb demonic power, it would be of great help to shape his divine body. Tan Xiu took a deep breath and strode to the second floor. He stopped at the door and then knocked on it. "You are?" The door was opened. The silver-haired old man looked at Tan Xiu with a curious look in his eyes. "I'm Tan Xiu from Star City," said Tan Xiu. The silver-haired old man suddenly understood. However, he immediately frowned because he didn't expect that Tan Xiu was so young. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "You see, I'm old and muddle-headed. You just called me. Wait for a while. Some people came to my place to sell old objects. I need to entertain them." "Old objects?" Tan Xiu pretended to be surprised. "Can I follow and have a look?" The silver-haired old man wanted to refuse, but he recalled that Tan Xiu came to buy his precious stone materials, so he reluctantly nodded. He entered the room. The silver-haired old man seemed to have forgotten Tan Xiu's existence as he continued to move the small coffin with the middle-aged man and woman. "I can't open it. You said it's an ancestral heirloom. Could it be that none of your ancestors can open it?" Finally, the silver-haired old man couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged man was dressed in plain clothes and looked simple and honest. He immediately shook his head and said, "The elders in my family originally thought that this coffin was inauspicious. So, they left it in the ancestral hall of our family. Recently, there was a big fire in our village. More than a dozen houses were burned, including our ancestral hall. We thought that everything inside had been burned, but we didn't expect to find that the coffin was still intact when we cleaned up the ruins. We also wanted to open it, but we couldn't damage it no matter how we smashed it with hammers or burned it. It's too hard. I don't know how hard a diamond is, but I'm sure that the material of this coffin is definitely harder than a diamond." "Yes, it's indeed very hard." The silver-haired old man nodded. "I just tried using an electric drill and a cutting machine, but I still couldn't destroy it. Also, this is the first time I've seen this thing. I can't tell what material it's made of, nor do I know from which dynasty it was passed down. As for the valuation, it's really hard for me to say." The middle-aged man and woman glanced at each other. Both of them looked disappointed. They had visited more than a dozen antique shops, but none of the shop owners or antique experts could figure out the value of this coffin. Even the one with the highest value was only willing to pay them 50,000 yuan. "Old man, please tell us the price," asked the middle-aged man. "We'll sell it to you if we think it's suitable. But if we think the price is not suitable, we'll leave now." The silver-haired old man had obviously considered the price issue. Upon hearing the middle-aged man's inquiry, he stretched out a finger and said, 100,000 yuan. "I'll buy it." The middle-aged man and woman still looked disappointed after hearing the price. The middle-aged woman then asked with an expectant look, "Can you give us a higher price? We're in dire need of money, so we can't sell it for 100,000 yuan." The silver-haired old man was silent for a moment. Then he slowly said, 120,000 yuan. "This is the highest price I can offer, because I'm also taking a big risk to buy this object. If you can accept this price, we can trade now. If not, then I won't send it off." "I'm sorry, but I can't sell it for 120,000 yuan, said the middle-aged man bitterly. After saying that, he wrapped the coffin with the yellow cloth again, His mood was particularly gloomy. Wait! Tan Xiu suddenly opened his mouth. The middle-aged man stared blankly. Even the middle-aged woman and the silver-haired old man looked surprised. Tan Xiu looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "Can you tell me if something happened to your family? Are you in urgent need of money?" "Yeah." The middle-aged man bitterly said. "A big fire broke out at home. The whole house was burned down, and my father was also severely burned. My husband and I borrowed a lot of money to treat my father's injury. If this thing can't be sold for 300,000 yuan, we won't be able to pay off our debt." Chapter 216. With a compassionate expression, Tan Xiu heavily nodded and said, "Filial piety is the most important of all virtues. You did the right thing. I don't know what this thing is, but this old man can give 120,000 yuan, so it's a good thing. I'll give you 300,000 yuan to sell it to me." "Really?" The middle-aged man and woman's eyes lit up and looked excited. Tan Xiu took out his mobile and calmly said, "Tell me your bank account number and I'll transfer the money to you now. Remember, the most important thing for a person is to be filial. Even if you have to sell everything you have, I'll transfer the money to you now." "Thank you." "Thank you," said the middle-aged man gratefully. After getting the middle-aged man's bank account number, Tan Xiu pondered for a moment and then transferred 320,000 yuan to the account. Then he calmly said, "Give me another 20,000 yuan. Consider it as the money to buy nutritional supplements for the old man." The middle-aged man and woman looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they nearly knelt down in gratitude to Tan Xiu. It must be noted that they were really short of money at the moment. Not only did they have to pay off their debt, but they also had to rebuild their house and send their children to school. The debt they said they owed was actually only 200,000 yuan, and the extra 100,000 yuan was for them to build their house and send their children to school. 20,000 yuan. It was definitely not a small amount for them. A few minutes later, after the middle-aged man and woman left, only the silver-haired old man and Tan Xiu were left in the room. The old man squinted his eyes and carefully observed Tan Xiu for a while before he slowly said, "If my guess is correct, you spent 320,000 yuan to buy this object, but it's not all because of the other party's filial piety. People were in high spirits when encountering happy events." Tan Xiu smiled and said, "Indeed. Since you don't want to buy such a good thing, then I'll naturally buy it. But of course, even if you finally buy it, I'll still find a way to get it no matter how high the price is." The silver-haired old man's expression changed. He pushed the glasses on his eye socket and asked in a deep voice, "Do you know what this thing is?" Tan Xiu nodded. However, he didn't talk about this issue again. After all, the silver-haired old man couldn't understand the demon stones. After putting away the things, he asked, "May I know your surname?" The silver-haired old man said, "My surname is Hu. You can call me Professor Hu." Tan Xiu said, "Elder Hu, I believe you're also aware of the purpose of my coming from Star City. I want to buy those 2 ores from you. How much do you have?" A strange light flickered in the silver-haired old man's eyes as he said, "There are 2 wintertide fluorites and only 1 star fragment stone. They were about the size of an adult's fist. Since you recognize these 2 ores, I believe you also know their value." Tan Xiu said, "Can you show me something first?" "All right." The silver-haired old man brought Tan Xiu downstairs, through the corridor, and into the small courtyard at the back. What surprised Tan Xiu was that there were no plants in the yard. Other than the cold cement floor, there was only the house painted black. Standing in the courtyard, it gave people a gloomy and oppressive feeling. "Wait for me," the silver-haired old man said, and then entered the side room. It didn't take long for him to return to Tan Xiu with 2 small black suitcases. "The things you want are in the suitcase. Open it and have a look." Tan Xiu opened the suitcase. After seeing the wintertide fluorite and star fragment stone, he fiddled with them for 2 minutes before he slowly nodded and said, "These are indeed wintertide fluorite and star fragment stone. Professor Hu, please name your price." The silver-haired old man said, 2 wintertide fluorites, 5 million each. 10 million star fragment stone, 20 million in total. If you want them, pay the money. If not, then please leave." 20 million? Tan Xiu frowned. He only had a few million now and couldn't afford 20 million. However, in order to get the wintertide fluorite and star fragment stone, he dialed Kong Xia's cell number and asked her to transfer 20 million to him. A few minutes later, the silver-haired old man received 20 million in funds. May I ask what you want these 2 ores for? Of course, if it's inconvenient, then forget it. Forging tools. Tan Xiu nodded. He carried 2 small suitcases and a yellow cloth bag wrapped with the demon stone coffin and turned to leave. The silver-haired old man quickly asked, "You know forging techniques? What do you want to forge?" Tan Xiu replied while walking, "I know a bit of forging techniques, but it's inconvenient to say what I want to forge. Our transaction is over, so I'll go back first." "That's right. If you can get these 2 ores in the future, remember to contact me. I'll buy as many as you have." The silver-haired old man was silent for a few seconds before he slowly said, "Although I only have these, I know someone else also has some wintertide fluorite and star fragment stone. It's just that I don't know if he will sell them or not." Tan Xiu halted his pace and asked in surprise, "There's more? Who's that?" The silver-haired old man said, "My best friend, Lu Bai, a geologist from the archaeology department of Shanghai University. If you want to find him, I can help you. He's in Tianjin City now." Tan Xiu said with a smile, "Professor Hu, you haven't had your dinner yet, right? How about we have a meal together?" A strange light flashed in the silver-haired old man's eyes as he nodded and said, "All right, I'll hold a welcoming dinner for you. I can also meet my old friend while I'm at it." The night in Tianjin City was like the stars falling from the firmament. Colorful lights illuminated thousands of households, and the flashing neon lights guided a river of flowing lights. Lotus Blossom House. It was a famous upscale restaurant in Tianjin City. Whether it was the dishes or the environment, they were all top-notch. The restaurant was 3 stories high, with an open hall on the first floor. There were no tables or chairs, but all kinds of inlaid calligraphy and paintings were hung on the surrounding walls. Each painting had an inscription, and the patterns of the paintings were all related to lotuses. Tan Xiu followed the silver-haired old man, Professor Hu, to the Lotus Blossom House. Only then did he know that there was an extremely demanding requirement for guests to dine here, which was to leave at least 1 painting in the hall on the first floor. Professor Hu's painting was one of the paintings in the hall. Tan Xiu scanned the hall with his spiritual sense and found that there were more than 200 paintings in the hall. In other words, only more than 200 guests could bring their friends to dine here. This rule is really strange. Tan Xiu followed behind the silver-haired old man, Professor Hu, and sighed while walking upstairs. Professor Hu indifferently said, "Some people have such a hobby. How they manage it is their business. There are a total of 24 private rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floor. If the guests are all full one day, it's impossible for them to come and dine again. Not to mention, this gimmick is quite effective. It's almost full every day." Hunger marketing. Tan Xiu recalled the marketing model of Apple's mobile phone and slowly nodded. This gimmick used the consumer's mentality that rare things are precious. As long as the food and wine were good, the business was bound to be good. Professor Hu, the prophet of the Lotus Blossom House, using this business philosophy shouldn't be much, right? Professor Hu shook his head and said, "It's very big." But Tan Xiu was surprised. Professor Hu said, "The rarer something is, the more it is expensive." Tan Xiu suddenly understood. Even if there were only 24 private rooms and 24 tables, if the price was extremely expensive, the profit margin would be very big. The nearly 100 square meters private room was divided into a dining room and a small living room. Because the old friend mentioned by Professor Hu had not arrived yet, the 2 of them sat on the sofa in the small living room. A waiter wearing a cheongsam served the tea list, drinks, and desserts. A pot of dahong pao and 4 desserts were placed on the tea table in front of the 2 of them. Expensive, really expensive. A pot of dahong pao is 2,800 yuan, and 4 desserts are 1,200 yuan. They haven't even dined yet, but they have already spent 4,000 yuan. It seems that the owner of this restaurant has truly displayed the essence of the rarer something is, the more it is precious. The threshold is too high. The guests who can dine here must not only know how to paint, but they must also be rich. Tan Xiao couldn't help but sigh. Professor Hu said with a smile, "You're so young, yet you can take out 20 million yuan to buy a few stones. I believe your background is not simple, right?" "I'm just a student who just took the college entrance test," Tan Xiao replied. Professor Hu stared blankly and said with surprise, "You're still studying? Who's still studying?" The door of the private room was opened by the waiter, and a balding old man in a Chinese tunic suit came in. The most eye-catching thing about him was his pair of eyes, which were bright and full of expression. Behind the old man was a beautiful girl with a graceful figure and fairy-like appearance. Even though Tan Xiao was accustomed to seeing beauties, he was still somewhat moved. Professor Hu stood up and said with a smile, "Old Lu, you're late." Lu Bai forced a smile and said, "Your Tianjin city is too congested. It's almost as crowded as Shanghai." Professor Hu couldn't help laughing. His eyes swept over the girl and said with a smile, "The first beauty of the imperial capital, Mu Weining. I heard that a few days ago, your white crane playing with lotus painting caused quite a commotion in this lotus blossom house." "You're overpraising me, Professor Hu," Mu Weining said modestly. Professor Hu faintly smiled and pointed to Tan Xiao to Lu Bai, saying, "Old Lu, the one who wants to see you today is him." "Hello, Professor Lu." "I'm Tan Xiao," said Tan Xiao. "You want to see me?" Lu Bai asked with a puzzled expression. "I heard from Professor Hu that Professor Lu has several precious ores in his hands," said Tan Xiao. "So, may I ask if Professor Lu is willing to sell them?" Lu Bai looked at Tan Xiao with a surprised expression and then looked at Professor Hu with a questioning expression. "I've already sold my 2 wintertide fluorites and the star fragment stone to him," said Professor Hu. "But this kid's appetite is quite big." Lu Bai suddenly understood. He looked at Tan Xiao with a slightly cold expression and said, "I understand your intention, but I won't sell my stones." "What a pity." Tan Xiao secretly sighed inside and silently nodded. As the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't snatch what others love. He had bought 2 wintertide fluorites and a star fragment stone from Professor Hu and was actually quite satisfied. Being able to buy more was naturally a good thing. If the other party didn't want to sell, he wouldn't force them. Chapter 217. Mu Weining, who stood behind Lu Bai, had a strange glint flashing in her eyes. She knew that her teacher had several precious ores. She heard that he got them from an ancient tomb many years ago and had been kept as a treasure by her teacher. She was very curious. She was curious about why Tan Xiao would buy those precious ores at such a young age. "Serve the dishes." Professor Hu didn't care whether Lu Bai was willing to sell those ores or not. His purpose was very simple. He wanted to figure out Tan Xiao's identity and conveniently get together with his old friend. After taking a seat in the dining room, Lu Bai asked in a seemingly casual manner, "You're Tan Xiao, right? The value of wintertide fluorite and star fragment stone is extremely high. Can you tell me what you want to use them for?" "Forging tools," Tan Xiao replied calmly. Lu Bai stared blankly for a moment before he couldn't help laughing and said, "Are you kidding me? Wintertide fluorite is a good compatible or easy to cut and smelt, but the star fragment stone is as hard as a diamond. Using it to forge tools is not funny at all." Tan Xiao didn't explain. The star fragment stone might not be able to forge tools in other people's hands, but he could easily melt it in his hands. How could the method of refining weapons he knew be comprehensible by ordinary people? Professor Hu's curiosity was aroused again. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "Tan Xiao, you said you want to forge tools. Can you tell me the forging method? Also, what do you want to forge?" "Some small objects are not worth mentioning," Tan Xiao said indifferently. "Even if I tell you the forging method, you won't understand it." Professor Hu and Lu Bai exchanged glances and secretly shook their heads. Arrogant. They felt that Tan Xiao was really too arrogant, and his remarks made them feel very dissatisfied inwardly. Even Mu Weining felt that Tan Xiao was a bit arrogant and couldn't help but despise him. Professor Hu looked at Mu Weining and asked, "I heard that you graduated from Imperial Capital University and are going to Shanghai University to study as a postgraduate?" Mu Weining nodded and said, I studied law before, but I don't like it. I like traveling and also like archaeology, so I'm going to Shanghai University with my teacher to study archaeology. Archaeology? Tan Xiu raised his eyebrows as a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. He had just finished his college entrance examination, and he had filled in his application for archaeology. The main reason he applied for this exam was to find precious materials that could aid his cultivation. Professor Hu sighed, archaeology is a great field of study. Exploring the 5,000 years of civilization left in China and unearthing the knowledge of civilization that has not been recorded in the historical records will have a great impact and benefit to our future generations. Lao Lu is a geology professor and the vice president of the Archaeology Association. You can learn a lot from him. Mu Weining gently nodded and said, Teacher is very knowledgeable. In just the past few days, he has taught me many things and benefited me a lot. Bang bang. The box's door was knocked as the waiter came in and said with a smile, Ladies and gentlemen, our Lotus Blossom House has welcomed another distinguished guest who has successfully passed the painting test. According to the old rules, he will come to the private room to propose a toast. Professor Hu was surprised. The Lotus Blossom House is very lively these days. In just 10 days, 4 or 5 people had successfully become VIPs here with their painting skills. Who is this person today? Zhu Xiang. The waiter said with a smile. Professor Hu's brows pricked as he said, It turns out to be that arrogant and insufferably arrogant brat. I was originally too lazy to see him, but since it's your Lotus Blossom House's rule, then let him come. Lu Bai was surprised. Old Hu, your evaluation isn't very good, no? What's that brat's origin? Professor Hu shook his head and sighed. He's a genius in calligraphy and painting. But he's been spoiled by his family. He doesn't know how to be modest at such a young age and is arrogant and rude to everyone. You should have heard of the Shanghai Golden Mandarin Duck Art Exhibition 2 years ago, right? That brat amazed the world with a single brilliant feat in that art exhibition and became known to countless people. Lu Bai suddenly said, So it's him. He's indeed a proud little guy. However, I don't know much about calligraphy and painting, so I didn't pay much attention to him. Mu Weining said, I've heard of him. His character is not good and has ruined many girls' innocence. Professor Hu was surprised. What do you mean? Mu Weining said, At first, I was also very fond of his calligraphy and paintings. I even collected one of them. But I inadvertently heard from a friend that he has a bad reputation. He once ruined a girl's innocence in Shanghai and then abandoned her. She was pregnant with his child and jumped from a building dozens of floors high, resulting in a corpse and 2 lives. His family has some connections, so they later suppressed this matter. However, in order to find out whether this matter is true or not, I asked a friend in Shanghai to help me, and the result of the investigation was true. Bastard! Lu Bai's complexion changed as he angrily cursed. Tan Xiu wasn't interested in these matters. He silently ate his meal and considered whether he should immediately rush back to Star City or stay in Tianjin City for the night and go back tomorrow morning. There was one thing he must do as soon as possible, and that was the establishment of the winery. Although he had taught Scarblade Chang the brewing recipe and process, but after the winery was rebuilt, it was hard to say whether it could produce the delicious wine that he was looking forward to. But the more resources he needed, the more funds he would need. If he didn't find a way to make money faster, he would absolutely be unable to support his and Gu Yin's cultivation. In addition, he also had to go to Jingmen Island in the next few days to see Gu Yen's condition. The longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for her injury. He had asked people from various parties to help him find the Chrono Crystal and the Devil Revival Grass. Although the possibility of these 2 things existing on Earth was very slim, he was still unwilling to give up this chance. Excuse me for disturbing you. I'm Bai Yu, the general manager of Lotus Blossom House. There was a knock on the door of the private room, and a middle-aged woman in business attire walked in with an arrogant young man. Professor Hu stood up. Although he didn't like the young man, he had to give Bai Yu face. After all, the Bai family also had a transcendent status in Tianjin City. Although Bai Yu was the manager of Lotus Blossom House, The regular customers knew that she was actually the owner of Lotus Blossom House. Congratulations, Manager Bai. Your honorable restaurant has added another distinguished guest. Bai Yu said with a smile, Thank you, Professor Hu. You haven't come to our Lotus Blossom House for a while. Is it because our service here isn't good enough that you are dissatisfied? Professor Hu waved his hand and said, I've been very busy recently, so I rarely come here. Bai Yu nodded with a smile and said, Professor Hu and everyone, let me introduce you. This is our Lotus Blossom House's distinguished guest, Zhu Xiang. Zhu Xiang, this is Professor Hu, a former professor of history at Tianjin University. Zhu Xiang entered the box. His eyes swept over the others and then fell on Mu Weining. Even his whole mind was attracted by Mu Weining. His expression was sluggish. Even though Bai Yu and Professor Hu were talking, he didn't hear anything clearly. As a young master of Tianjin City who studied at Shanghai University for 4 years, he had seen countless beauties, but none of them could be compared to Mu Weining. Zhu Xiang. Bai Yu frowned and called out again. This time, Zhu Xiang finally came back to his senses. He looked at Bai Yu and immediately walked a few steps toward Mu Weining. Trying to show a refined and courteous appearance, he stretched out his hand and said with a smile, Hello, I'm Zhu Xiang. May I ask your surname, miss? In an instant, Professor Hu's face turned black. Even Bai Yu looked embarrassed as she angrily glared at Zhu Xiang. Mu Weining didn't get up. She didn't even look at Zhu Xiang. She just sat there and quietly tasted the dishes. Tan Xiu also didn't get up. He wasn't interested in Zhu Xiang, nor was he interested in this Lotus Blossom House. His purpose of coming here was to buy the Wintertide Fluorite and the Star Fragment Stone from Lubai. Unfortunately, he failed. Therefore, he had made up his mind. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he would find a hotel to stay for the night and directly return to Star City tomorrow. Zhu Xiang slightly frowned as he looked at Mu Weining ignoring him. Even though his heart was full of anger, he still pretended to be indifferent and modestly said with a smile, Miss, I used a painting to get a VIP seat in the Lotus Blossom House. I wonder if Miss knows anything about painting and calligraphy? I've brought my work here. Do you want to appreciate it? Mu Weining finally slowly raised her head as she coldly looked at Zhu Xiang. She shook her head and said, I won't appreciate it unless it's the work of a famous master. Also, I'll give you a piece of advice. Respecting the old and loving the young is the traditional virtue of the Chinese nation. The manager of this restaurant just introduced Professor Hu, yet you ignored him. I really want to know if you have any upbringing or not. If you don't, I know a place that may make you more educated. Sitting across from her, Tan Xiu raised his head. He felt that Mu Weining's words were quite interesting. A trace of a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he asked, Where? Mu Weining glanced at Tan Xiu and lightly said, The Juvenile Detention Center. Tan Xiu looked at Mu Weining with a strange expression. He was at a loss whether he had to cry or laugh inside. Her insulting words were really vicious. It was fine if it was a labor camp, but she had to add the word, young. Didn't this mean that in her eyes, Zhu Xiang was still underage? Zhu Xiang's face was filled with anger, but he suppressed it in an instant. How could he not understand the meaning behind Mu Weining's words? However, Mu Weining was really too beautiful. Facing such a beauty, he could only suppress the hatred inside his heart and decided to deal with her after getting her. Zhu Xiang secretly took a deep breath. He turned to look at Professor Hu and said, I didn't expect to see you here, Professor Hu. Are you all right? My grandpa said that you're in poor health last time, so you must take care of yourself. Professor Hu's face turned darker. Zhu Xiang's words seemed to be deliberately talking about his health. After coldly snorting, he sat back in his seat without saying anything. Lu Bai looked at his old friend's expression and secretly sighed inside. He then turned to Bai Yu and said, Manager Bai, right? Please help us send our guest off. Today's monthly votes are too few. Coupled with the gallstone attack, Jingye is mentally and physically exhausted, so I only have 3 chapters. I ask for your understanding, brothers and sisters. Also, it's already the end of the month. Please throw your monthly votes to Jingye, brothers and sisters. Jingye really needs the support of monthly votes. Thank you very much. Chapter 218. Bai Yu was also very angry at Zhu Xiang at this moment, but he was a guest, so it wasn't good for her to flare up. She could only suppress the anger in her heart and nod at Zhu Xiang. Since the guest in this room doesn't welcome you, then you can leave first. Zhu Xiang frowned and coldly snorted. What do you mean, Manager Bai? I am a distinguished guest of your Lotus Blossom House. Don't tell me you treat me with this attitude? Bai Yu didn't expect Zhu Xiang to be so ungrateful. Although she was full of anger towards him, she didn't flare up. She just wanted him to leave the box first, and then she would leave after saying a few words of apology. However, he bit Lu Dongbin like a dog biting the hand that fed him. With her anger soaring, Bai Yu no longer wanted to endure Zhu Xiang and said in a deep voice, Mr. Zhu, the other party has already asked you to leave. Don't tell me you still don't know what's good for you and stay here? Could it be that you would only be satisfied if he chased you out? In addition, although you have become an honored guest of our Lotus Blossom House, please conduct yourself with dignity. If you want to make trouble in our Lotus Blossom House, please leave. I will remove your VIP quota. Zhu Xiang flew into a rage. That feeling of being targeted by everyone made his self-esteem unable to take it. With his complexion constantly changing, he gritted his teeth and said, Manager Bai, you must take responsibility for your words. I want to give this painting to your Lotus Flower House, but you actually want to drive me away? Do you want to ruin your own reputation? Also, I've seen the paintings downstairs. Almost all of them are rubbish. I've already put up with my paintings being placed together with rubbish, and you still don't know what's good for you? Bai Yu was so angry that she laughed. She stared at Zhu Xiang and said, Good, good, good. I didn't expect you to have such a character. I will take responsibility for my words. From today onwards, if you dare to step into my Lotus Blossom House, it will be considered as a provocation. I want to see what ability you, Zhu Xiang, have, and what ability your Zhu family has. Professor Hu and Mu Weining also revealed anger at this moment. Among the paintings hanging downstairs, there were their works. Now that Zhu Xiang evaluated them as trash, it made them very angry. Professor Hu slapped the table, stood up and shouted in a deep voice, You're just a kid who spouts nonsense. You haven't learned much, yet you're so arrogant. If our paintings are trash, then what about yours? Rare treasure? Aren't you afraid of making a fool of yourself? Zhu Xiang sneered and said, Professor Hu, you're just a historian. How dare you compare yourself with me in painting? I respect that you have some ability in history and literature, but when it comes to calligraphy and painting, don't make a fool of yourself. I've seen your painting downstairs. It's indeed rubbish. If you don't agree, we can have a competition and let all the guests in Lotus Blossom House comment. Professor Hu was so angry that his lips trembled, and his raised arm trembled slightly. He knew that Zhu Xiang was arrogant, despotic, and unbridled, but he never imagined that Zhu Xiang would be arrogant to such an extent. Doesn't he have the virtue of respecting his elders? Mu Weining got up and coldly stared at Zhu Xiang, saying, I'll use his strong point to attack his weak point. I really can't agree with your character. Since you want to compete, then let me accompany you in this gamble. Zhu Xiang was stunned for a moment before he proudly said, You? It's not that I'm looking down on you, but even Professor Hu can't do it. How can you be better than me? Suddenly, his eyes turned and a wonderful idea floated in his mind. A treacherous smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he cleared his throat and said, However, it's not a problem for you to replace Professor Hu to bet with me. But since it's a bet, there should be a stake. I want to know, what do you want to bet? Mu Weining slightly furrowed her brows. Zhu Xiang's expression made her feel disgusted. After a moment of silence, she slowly said, I have a treasured calligraphy and painting of the great calligrapher Wang Shiji. If I lose, I'll give that calligraphy and painting to you. But if I win, what can you take out? Zhu Xiang frowned and sneered. Wang Shiji's treasured calligraphy and painting is indeed a priceless treasure. But I don't think it's enough. If you lose, you have to promise me an additional condition. No matter what condition I put forward, you must agree to it. If I lose, I'll give you a painting of the famous Tang Dynasty painter Li Sixuan's Jiang Fan Pavilion, and I'll also promise you another condition. This, Mu Weining was a bit hesitant. She cared about Wang Shiji's treasured calligraphy and painting, but if she lost it, she would only feel distressed for a few days. But she was afraid that Zhu Xiang would put forward an excessive condition that she couldn't accept. In addition, she also had some understanding of Zhu Xiang's painting skills. Although this person's character was not good, his painting skills were still very good. She couldn't win against him. At most, she could only be on par with him. What should she do? Should she just give up like this? If she gave up, it would mean that she was timid and admitted that her skill was inferior to him. For a moment, Mu Weining was in a dilemma. Tan Xiao, who was silently tasting the dishes, finally put down the chopsticks in his hand. He shook his head and sighed, "I've seen a lot of shameless hypocrites, but only a few can compare with you, Zhu Xiang. The condition you put forward is actually digging a pit for her, isn't it? In fact, even if you don't say it now, I know what you're thinking. It's nothing more than using that condition as a constraint to make her sleep with you after you win. Am I right?" In an instant, everyone's complexion in the private room greatly changed. Having his thoughts seen through, Zhu Xiang was immediately enraged. He bore a grudge against Tan Xiao from the bottom of his heart and shouted, "Don't imagine your shamelessness on me. I do like her very much, but I won't go so far as to use conditions to force her. A fair and graceful lady is a gentleman's desire. At most, he just wants her to give him the right to pursue her. After he wins her heart, I'll marry her and make her my wife." Marry her? Isn't that the same as having the intention to sleep with her? Everyone in the private room revealed a contemptuous look in their eyes. Mu Weining's complexion was even more dreadfully gloomy. Tan Xiao couldn't help laughing and said, "I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen someone as shameless as you. How about this? I'll play with you, how about it? If I lose, you can state whatever conditions you want. If you lose, I don't want your calligraphy and paintings. Just get the hell out of here." Zhu Xiang's eyes nearly burst into flames. He angrily glared at Tan Xiao and sternly shouted, "Who are you? Why are you poking your nose into other people's business?" Tan Xiao pointed at Mu Weining and flatly said, "You just said that a fair and graceful lady is a gentleman's desire. You can just treat me as a protector of a flower. What? You don't even dare to compete with me? You still dare to compete with her?" Zhu Xiang clenched his fists. If he wasn't restraining himself, he really wanted to fiercely punch Tan Xiao's face. Looking at Mu Weining's gloomy expression, he gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, fine, fine. Since you want to humiliate yourself, then I'll fulfill your wish. However, I don't like the stakes. I'll use that River Sail Pavilion painting to bet on your collection." "My collection?" Tan Xiao rolled his eyes. He turned to look at Mu Weining and lightly said, "Do you dare to lend me your treasured calligraphy and painting of Wang Shiji?" Mu Weining took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "I'll lend it to you." Tan Xiao shrugged his shoulders and said, "Did you hear that? Wang Shiji's treasured calligraphy and painting should be enough, right?" Zhu Xiang was so angry that he laughed. He clapped his hands and said, "Good, good, good. Since you want to bet, then I'll accompany you. Say it. Do you want to bet here? Or somewhere else?" Tan Xiao looked at Bai Yu and calmly asked, "Manager Bai, right? Since your restaurant has the custom of painting lotus flowers, you should have prepared a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone, right? How about we do as they said just now? Your restaurant will provide the painting tools and let all the guests in this restaurant be the judges?" Bai Yu shot a deep look at Tan Xiao and nodded, "I'll immediately issue the order. The competition will be held half an hour later in the hall on the first floor." "All right," replied Tan Xiao calmly. Bai Yu looked at Zhu Xiang and said with an unfriendly expression, "Now, you should leave with me, right?" Zhu Xiang snorted coldly and provocatively glanced at Tan Xiao before he turned around and left. Inside the private box, the anger on Professor Hu's face slowly receded and was replaced by a bitter smile. He looked at Tan Xiao, shook his head and sighed, "Young man, you shouldn't be swayed by your emotions. I know you have good intentions, but painting on the spot can't be faked. Wang Shiji's treasured calligraphy and painting, even if it's not priceless, is still extremely precious. It's something that all the painters in the world of calligraphy and painting yearn for. At this moment, Lu Bai's contempt for Tan Xiu was even more intense. He thought that Tan Xiu was jealous of Zhu Xiang because of Mu Weining. He even thought that Tan Xiu was very stupid. He clearly knew that Zhu Xiang's painting skills were excellent, yet he still wanted to send his face to be slapped. The most annoying thing was that he also had to lose Mu Weining's treasured calligraphy and painting collection. Mu Weining was also a bit angry and bitter. Although Tan Xiu was helping her, she had to lose her calligraphy and painting, which made her feel a bit distressed. It must be noted that the calligraphy and painting was given to her by her grandfather. It took her a lot of effort to find it and buy it with a lot of money. Tan Xiu, do you really know how to paint? Mu Weining hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but ask. A little bit, Tan Xiu said lightly. A little bit? Mu Weining was even more disappointed. Professor Hu's eyes moved away from Tan Xiu and said with a forced smile, "It would be good if Yang Qing was here. He's hailed as the most outstanding genius of the new generation in the world of calligraphy and painting. His painting skills are extremely high, and there are only a few masters of the older generation who are better than him." Upon hearing it, Lu Bai nodded and said, "I've also heard of Yang Qing's name. He's indeed a very powerful young painter. He started to learn painting at the age of 5 and was able to paint good works at the age of 10. From 16 to 26 years old, he won hundreds of awards in 10 years. That's right. Professor Hu nodded. If it weren't for a painting that suddenly appeared, I originally thought that his 100 birds looking up to the phoenix would win the first place in the next Asian calligraphy and painting competition. A painting that suddenly appeared? Lu Bai was surprised. What painting? Professor Hu sighed. To be exact, it's an architectural design. It's a large-scale and magnificent design that was personally drawn by someone. Chapter 219. Lu Bai looked surprised, and even Mu Weining showed a curious expression. On the contrary, Tan Xiu looked a bit surprised after hearing Professor Hu's words. An architectural design drawing? Could it be the one I drew? Old Hu, tell me the specifics. How can an architectural design win a prize in the Asian calligraphy and painting competition? Asked Lu Bai. Why can't it be? Professor Hu said with all seriousness. You haven't seen that painting, but you will definitely be shocked if you see it with your own eyes. I have a lot of famous friends in the calligraphy and painting world. Even they admire it and feel ashamed of their inferiority. The author of that architectural design drawing has reached the acme of perfection and is exquisite to the extreme. The building painted by him is even more ingenious, as though the majestic aura of the heavenly palace has been painted. Suddenly, Professor Hu's eyes lit up. He quickly took out his mobile phone and opened an email. He pulled out a picture from it and handed it to Lu Bai, saying, "I just remembered that my old friend sent this architectural design drawing to me. Unfortunately, it's just a picture and I haven't seen the real painting." Lu Bai took the mobile phone. After looking at it for a few seconds, his pupils quickly shrunk as disbelief burst out from his eyes. Even if he didn't have a deep understanding of calligraphy and painting, he could still see that this architectural design drawing was extraordinary. The strength of the strokes, the skill, and the charm of the strokes were like dragons and snakes. It was simply a painting of the paradise in his dreams. What shocked him the most was not these, but the architectural design drawing itself. The building on it looked extremely majestic and extremely shocking. It was a strange style, but it vividly displayed the author's unique ideas. He dared to say that if anyone could build such a large building according to this architectural design drawing, it would definitely become the most famous landmark building in the country. Not only would it be famous throughout the country, but it would also be famous all over the world. I'm convinced. This old man has seen a lot of calligraphy and paintings in his life, and there are no lack of famous works among them. But there is absolutely nothing that can compare with this painting. Mu Weining hadn't seen the drawing yet, but her curiosity was aroused after seeing her teacher's shocked expression. She gently stood up and came to Lu Bai's side. After her eyes fell on the picture displayed on the mobile screen, her bent waist slightly shook. Mu Weining was shocked. She couldn't believe her eyes. She couldn't believe that there was someone in this world who could draw such a godly work. She had seen the fragments of the Along the River during the Qingming painting. She dared to guarantee that even the complete Along the River during the Qingming painting could not be compared to this painting. This painting, the buildings in the painting should only exist in the heavens. How could they be seen in the mortal world? Lu Bai handed the phone to Mu Weining. The shock on his old face had yet to fade as he sighed. The person who can draw this painting can definitely be called the painting god. I don't even dare to imagine how big of a sensation it will cause once the buildings in this painting are really built. Professor Hu agreed and said, "Indeed. If the buildings in this painting are really built, I will buy a house in the residential area no matter what." Lu Bai said decisively, "I'll go too." Mu Weining returned to her seat with her mobile phone. Her eyes were full of shock. She didn't even hear the conversation between Professor Hu and Lu Bai. Her sensual red lips slightly opened as she whispered, "If the creator of this painting is willing to accept an apprentice, I'll be the first one to worship him." Her voice was not loud, but Professor Hu, Lu Bai, and even Tan Xiu could hear it clearly. Professor Hu and Lu Bai glanced at each other as a wry smile appeared on their faces. Even they had this kind of impulse. Tan Xiu reached out his hand to Mu Weining and said, "Let me have a look." Mu Weining came back to her senses and handed the phone to Tan Xiu with a complicated expression. Her eyes were a bit blurred, and no one knew what she was thinking. Tan Xiu took the phone and looked at the photo on it. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He didn't expect that the architectural design that was praised by Professor Hu, Lu Bai, and Mu Weining was really drawn by him. Subsequently, he reached out and returned the phone to Professor Hu. Upon seeing Tan Xiu's appearance, Professor Hu and Lu Bai secretly despised Tan Xiu. They thought that Tan Xiu didn't know how to appreciate a painting. Therefore, the two of them were even more worried about the competition later. So, the Lotus Blossom House's waiter came to the box and invited everyone to the exhibition hall downstairs. When the four of them came to the first floor, they saw dozens of guests had gathered around the two tables in the center of the hall. The voices of those people also passed into the ears of the four people. How lucky! Today, I can actually see the talent competition between two young talents. Speaking of painting, I also learned it for a period of time in the past. Unfortunately, my talent was not good enough, so I threw it away. Fortunately, I can come to the Lotus Blossom House with Old Wang today, so I can see a good fight between a dragon and a tiger. I've heard of Zhu Xiang's name. He's a very famous young painter with a very high level. But that Tan Xiu, I've never heard of him. He should be an unknown junior. Zhu Xiang is too arrogant. Just now, when he came to the box for a toast, he was completely perfunctory and didn't have a modest attitude at all. Even if this kind of person's painting skills are good, I'm afraid the paintings won't have much charm. But I'm very curious about the young man who will compete with him. The entire Tianjin city is only so big. It's already good enough to have Zhu Xiang. Who else can be more amazing than him? In any case, I think Zhu Xiang will definitely win tonight. I think so too. Let's wait and see a good show. Listening to these discussions, Tan Xiu secretly smiled wryly inside. He was not famous in Tianjin City, nor was he famous in the painting and calligraphy circle. It was no wonder that everyone was full of confidence in Zhu Xiang. However, if you don't have a diamond, don't take up porcelain work. He was confident in his painting level. Not to mention that his opponent was just Zhu Xiang. Even if it was a master painter in the country, he wouldn't be afraid. Everyone make way. Upon seeing Tan Xiu and the others coming down, Bai Yu immediately called everyone to step back and vacate a large space in the middle. She walked to the front of Tan Xiu and asked, "Are you confident?" Tan Xiu could see Bai Yu's mind and nodded, "Don't worry." Bai Yu nodded and said, "If you're confident, then show 100% of your strength. I'm looking forward to your performance. I won't let you down," Tan Xiu said. After that, he walked to the middle position and lightly glanced at Zhu Xiang, saying, "Show your strength. Don't say that I bullied you if you lose." Zhu Xiang sneered, "Relying on you?" Go back to the furnace and practice for a few decades. Maybe you'll be qualified to say that. Whether you're a mule or a horse, pull it out. Tan Xiu no longer paid attention to him. He looked at Bai Yu and calmly asked, "What are the requirements of the competition?" Bai Yu brought out 10 men and women from the crowd. Only 2 of them were young, while the rest were middle-aged or elderly. Bai Yu pointed to the 10 people and said, "These 10 are our distinguished guests and have their paintings left in this hall. I can guarantee that they will be absolutely fair and just as the judges. In addition, after their evaluation, the other guests will also vote. As for the competition's requirements, it's very simple. You must create a landscape painting related to lotus in half an hour. Brush, paint, and paper are all ready." "All right." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "I have no problem with that either," said Zhu Xiang expressionlessly. Bai Yu nodded. She looked at the time and then said, "It's 8:28 p.m. now, and the end time is 8:58 p.m. I declare that the competition begins now." Zhu Xiang looked at Tan Xiu with a mocking expression and then quickly grabbed the brush on the table. After thinking for a while, he began to dip the brush in the paint and slowly painted on the flat xian paper. Tan Xiu was different. The moment Bai Yu announced the start of the competition, he slowly closed his eyes and imagined the painting he was about to paint in his mind. After a few seconds, he quickly grabbed the brush, identified the various paints, and began to paint. His painting speed was different from Zhu Xiang's. Soon, his brush moved like dragons and snakes as a pattern formed on the white xian paper. "I lost." Mu Weining saw Tan Xiu's painting speed and a bitter expression appeared on the corner of her mouth. She was well aware of the essence of painting. Unless one was a top-notch master painter, anyone who dared to paint like dragons and snakes would never be able to paint a truly good painting. There was a saying in the painting world that meticulously sculpted a slow work. Even if there was no spirit, there was still form. Mu Weining had never heard of Tan Xiu's name before, so he shouldn't have any fame in the painting world. He was just an unknown young man. Even if he had some painting skills, it was likely that he couldn't be compared to Zhu Xiang. Professor Hu secretly shook his head. He looked at Tan Xiu from afar and said with a forced smile, "Mu Weining, you shouldn't have promised him before. Looking at his appearance, I'm afraid he's going to lose your Wang Shiji painting." Mu Weining was a bit distressed, but she could still bear it and slowly said, "If I lose, then I lose. It's just a worldly possession, so I'll find it later." "You're quite open-minded." Professor Hu sighed. "However, I can tell that Tan Xiu's identity is not simple. If he loses your painting, I'm afraid he'll think of other ways to make it up to you." "What's his identity and background?" Mu Weining was surprised. "I don't know." Professor Hu shook his head. "But have you ever seen an ordinary student who has just taken the college entrance test, yet he can take out 20 million to buy a few stones? Furthermore, he also wants to buy the ores in old Li's hands, which means that he definitely has more than 20 million. He bought 2 wintertide fluorites and 1 star fragment stone from you, yet the price is so high." Mu Weining was surprised. "Old Li knows the price of those 2 ores." Professor Hu nodded. "The price I quoted is the lowest I can bear, and that brat is also very straightforward. He didn't bargain at all and sent someone to transfer the money to me. He just handed the luggage bag to the attendant for safekeeping, as well as the yellow cloth bundle which contains the things he bought. To be honest, I can't see through his background, nor can I see through him." Chapter 220. Lu Bai lightly said, "He's just pretending to be decent. Even if he has a bit of status and background, I'm afraid his painting skills are just average. It's just that he's young and impetuous. He deliberately wants to show his face because of jealousy. He'll know how to make a fool of himself after he loses." Professor Hu laughed. "You really don't favor him at all?" Lu Bai sneered. "Favor him? What qualifications does he have to make me favor him? If he can really beat Zhu Xiang, I'll agree to sell him the wintertide fluorite and the star fragment stone. I'll give them to him for free." Professor Hu forced a smile and said, "Old Lu, don't be impulsive." Lu Bai sneered, "You know my character, old Hu. I've always been a man of my word. If he really beats Zhu Xiang, I'll immediately return to Shanghai and take those 2 oars and give them to him. Bai Yu and the 10 judges, who were proficient in calligraphy and painting, shook their heads upon seeing Tan Xiu's fast painting. They thought that Tan Xiu was deliberately mystifying things. In fact, he didn't have any real talent. In their hearts, the scales of victory had tilted towards Zhu Xiang. Among them were Bai Yu, who was very tired of Zhu Xiang, and several other painting masters. 15 minutes later, Tan Xiu put away the brush and gently blew on the landscape painting twice. Then he took out a piece of white paper and spread it on the painting. "I'm done." Tan Xiu looked around and his eyes finally fell on Bai Yu's face. Bai Yu nodded and said, "It's not time yet. Wait for Zhu Xiang." "All right." Tan Xiu replied and then stood in front of the table and quietly waited. Nearly 30 minutes later, Zhu Xiang finally finished the landscape painting he wanted to paint. He raised his hand to wipe off the sweat on his forehead. A satisfied smile appeared on his handsome face as he said in a clear voice, "I've also finished my painting. And this painting is definitely the one I'm most satisfied with." Bai Yu nodded and asked, "Two gentlemen, which one of you will show the painting to everyone first?" Zhu Xiang arrogantly said, "I'll show my painting to everyone first. After I'm done, I'll make you feel that looking at paintings is the same as eating. It's absolutely tasteless to eat a poor one after eating a good one." "What do you think, Mr. Tang?" Bai Yu asked. "Whatever," Tan Xiu said indifferently. Bai Yu nodded and brought the 10 judges to the center. They surrounded Zhu Xiang's painting table and began to size up the painting Zhu Xiang had just painted. "Good foundation, the lines are clear and distinct. Green mountains, clear waters, waterfalls, and birds perched on the branches." The most satisfying thing was that in the pond at the foot of the mountain, there were actually beautiful lotus flowers blooming. Looking at this painting, one can imagine the beautiful scenery in this landscape painting. That's right. Look at the color combination. It's exquisite and warm, and the colors are especially bright. The birds on the branches opened their mouths as if they were singing a mountain song. I've seen a lot of paintings, but not many are better than this one. If I had to score it, I'd give it at least 80 points. Elegant. This painting actually gives me an elegant feeling. It's really not bad. I give it 81 points. 80 points. Bai Yu's eyes revealed a complicated expression as she listened to the judge's comments. Although Zhu Xiang's character were very bad, his painting skill was indeed amazing. There were a lot of paintings in her lotus blossom house, but there were no more than 10 paintings that were better than this one. At this moment, she couldn't help but secretly worry about Tan Xiu. Bai Yu secretly sighed inside. She then looked at Zhu Xiang and said, "Take your painting and let everyone have a look. Wait until everyone has finished looking at Tan Xiu's painting, then I'll judge the winner and loser for you." "All right." Zhu Xiang picked up his painting and slowly walked in front of the crowd. After a few minutes, he returned to the table and put his landscape painting on the table. He then looked at Tan Xiu and said with a sneer, "An ugly daughter-in-law has to see her parents-in-law. My painting has been shown to everyone. Now it's your turn. Of course, if you really think you have no chance of winning, I'm willing to give you some face. You can directly admit defeat now, so you don't need to show us your painting." Tan Xiu shook his head and smilingly said, "I really don't know where your confidence comes from. Zhu Xiang, right? Don't tell me you don't understand the truth?" Zhu Xiang raised his brows and sneered, "What truth?" Tan Xiu said, "The higher you stand, the harder you fall. You're clamoring for jubilation now, but in case you lose later, the degree of disgrace will be even higher." Zhu Xiang contemptuously said, "Relying on you? You want to beat me? Dream on. Cut the crap and take out your painting. Let everyone have a look." Tan Xiu took a step back and made a "please" gesture to Bai Yu. Bai Yu came to the table in front of Tan Xiu and gently took away the white paper covering the landscape painting. When her eyes fell on the painting, her eyes narrowed and her wrist trembled. Immediately, her pupils suddenly shrunk and disbelief burst out from her eyes. This painting, at this moment, no one could understand Bai Yu's shock. Her eyes were fixated on the landscape painting on the table, and her heartbeat was a few beats faster than usual. The 10 judges looked puzzled after seeing Bayu's appearance. When they came to the table and saw the painting on the table, they immediately showed the same expression as Bayu. Dead silence. The entire scene was extremely quiet. At this moment, even if a needle were to fall on the ground, everyone would be able to hear the sound. However, the 10 judges and Bayu were shivering at this time with disbelief in their eyes. What's going on? Finally, a middle-aged man in the crowd waiting in the periphery asked aloud. In a flash, the 10 judges and Bayu's body trembled violently, but they also sobered up from their stupor. The 11 people turned their heads with tacit understanding and angrily looked at the man who spoke. The middle-aged man looked confused and scratched the back of his head. He didn't understand how he offended the 10 judges and Bayu. Why did they look at him with angry expressions? Bayu took a deep breath and looked at Tan Xiao with a complicated expression, saying, I never thought that I would be able to see such a landscape painting in my life. I want to say that this is not a shock, but a fright. Tan Xiao, you really scared me. One of the 10 judges also said with a bitter expression, I'm also scared. I really can't believe that there's someone in this world who can paint such a landscape painting. Zhu Xiang was somewhat baffled by Bayu and the 10 judges. He couldn't even tell whether Tan Xiao's painting was good or not. After hesitating for a moment, he said aloud, Manager Bai and the 10 judges, is that brat's painting too horrible to look at? If that's the case, then tell everyone loudly and let him make a fool of himself. Shut up, shouted a judge angrily. Ugh. Zhu Xiang looked blank and a bad premonition involuntarily arose inside his heart. Bayu shot a deep look at Tan Xiao and asked, Mr. Tang, can you let me show your painting to everyone? I'll have to trouble you then. Tan Xiao nodded. Bayu nodded and carefully picked up the landscape painting painted by Tan Xiao and slowly walked step by step. She walked very slowly, almost every 2 steps. She would stop for half a minute. It took her 7 or 8 minutes to finish walking around the painting. Everyone, after seeing the landscape painting painted by Tan Xiao, all of them became extremely silent and looked at Zhu Xiang with an indescribably complicated expression, including Professor Hu Libai and the first beauty of the imperial capital, Mu Weining. Finally, Bayu carefully put the landscape painting on the table in front of Tan Xiao. After hesitating for a moment, she asked, Mr. Tang, I don't know if you're willing to sell this painting. Just name the price. I won't bargain as long as I can afford it. Tan Xiao lightly shook his head. He then looked at Mu Weining and said, since she chose to believe me and is willing to use her Wang Shiji's authentic work to make me bet with others, then I'll give this painting to her after the competition is over. As a matter of fact, it's very easy for me to paint such a thing. If I want to, I can even paint hundreds or thousands of them. However, I'm very lazy and slow, so my paintings will be very rare. It's very rare now, and it will be very rare in the future. You want to give this painting to me? Mu Weining asked with a dumbfounded expression. No, this is too precious. Tan Xiao indifferently said, dancing with words and showing off elegance. That's my evaluation of those literati. Therefore, painting can only be the spice of life and not the main track of life. It's fine to like it, but don't be obsessed with it, else the rest of your life will be very boring. Take it. There's no reason for me, Tan Xiao, to take back what I've given out. An extraordinary splendor flashed in Mu Weining's eyes. Tan Xiao's words made her heart palpitate inexplicably. After a moment of silence, she slowly nodded and said, Thank you. Zhu Xiang stood at the side. He hadn't been able to see what kind of landscape painting Tan Xiao had painted. But at this moment, a bad premonition arose in his heart, and it was getting stronger and stronger. Taking a deep breath, he saw that Tan Xiao and Mu Weining only cared about talking and didn't pay attention to him at all. He immediately angrily said, It's not certain who will win or lose. Is there a need to act mysterious like this? I want to see what kind of garbage you're painting. After that, he dashed to the table in front of Tan Xiao, and his eyes also fell on the landscape painting Tan Xiao had painted. The moment Zhu Xiang saw the painting, a chill quickly rushed into his heart. This chill did not come from the outside, but from the depths of his soul. Good painting. A peerless painting. Even though he had seen thousands of paintings, he had never seen a better painting than this one. It was like a towering mountain peak of a giant dragon, continuous and endless, crisscrossing and crisscrossing. On the summit of those mountain peaks, there were towering palaces. The richly ornamented palaces were shrouded in faint clouds and mist. Under the blue sky and white clouds, red-crowned cranes danced gracefully and white birds jumped in joy. A small boat was floating in the middle of a turbulent river. An elegant young man sat alone at the bow of the boat, holding a book in his hand and quietly reading it as he floated downstream. Chapter 221. Only a few dozen subscriptions are needed to enter the premium edition. Brothers and sisters, please support the genuine subscription. If you have the means, please subscribe automatically. Thank you very much. At the end of the river, it was not connected to the endless sea, but to a sparkling lake. In the middle of the lake, there was an antique pavilion, full of special charm. And in the pavilion, there was a barefoot girl, her toes touching the lake water, dripping on the delicate lotus in the lake. Suddenly, Zhu Xiang found that he had appeared in the painting, in that beautiful fairy-like world. What he saw was no longer a painting, but with his naked eyes, he really saw the scenery and the things in this world. Immersed in it. What does it mean to be immersed in it? At this moment, he was experiencing this kind of thing. On the first floor of the Lotus Blossom House, all the onlookers looked at Zhu Xiang with disdain. They had seen other people do shameful things, but they had never seen someone do it so thoroughly. 2 paintings. Whose painting was good? Whose painting was bad? They could tell clearly with their toes. Zhu Xiang's painting was good, but compared to Tan Xiu's painting, it was simply like heaven and earth. There was no comparison at all. Hey, that's surnamed Zhu. Now you know that there is always someone better than you? If I were you, I would quickly take off your pants, cover your head and get out of here. Don't continue to make a fool of yourself. A sarcastic sneer came from the crowd, immediately causing a burst of laughter. Another member of the crowd also revealed a look of disdain. He said in disdain, "Zhu, the competition is over and you've embarrassed yourself. Shouldn't you fulfill your promise and give him the painting you promised? The answer has been revealed, you won't go back on your words, right? You are the second young master of the Zhu family in Tianjin City. You shouldn't be the kind of person who can't afford to lose and even discredit your family, right?" In the crowd, Professor Hu's mouth twitched a few times. He recovered from the shock, looking at Tan Xiu with eyes that were completely different from before. He even began to blame himself for looking down on Tan Xiu. He was also a master painter, but he judged people by their appearance and looked down on Tan Xiu because of his age. "I've lived my whole life, but I've made a mistake today." Professor Hu could not help but shake his head and sigh with a wry smile. Suddenly, he began to sympathize with Lu Bai because he still clearly remembered what Lu Bai had said before. Wintertide fluorite and star fragment stone. He knew very well that Lu Bai had more wintertide fluorites and star fragment stones than he did. If he took it out to sell, the price might even be twice what he had sold it for. Lu Bai opened his mouth, but his throat seemed to be choked by a pair of invisible hands, causing his face to turn red, but he was unable to speak for a long time. He was a frog in a well. The bitterness in his heart surged like gold thread. Mu Weiniang's face was full of curiosity. She found that she believed what Professor Hu had said before. The identity of this young man was mysterious. She had even thought that he could see through Tan Xiu. That was really a big joke. However, inside her heart, she was full of excitement. Because she knew that since Tan Xiu said that he only had a few paintings, then the painting she got would definitely be priceless in the future. Zhu Xiang finally came to his senses after being ridiculed by the crowd. When he looked around in a daze, his complexion began to change from red to white, from white to green, from green to purple, and finally back to the color of a sheet of paper. He lost. Even if he was very reluctant, the fact was in front of him. He had to admit it. All of a sudden, Zhu Xiang's eyes turned red as he looked at Tan Xiu and sternly shouted, "Who the hell are you?" Tan Xiu lightly said, "I'm just an ordinary person, a student who has just taken the college entrance test." Don't think that I don't have any fame in the painting and calligraphy world. Even I don't want to have any fame. Because it will only bring me troubles, not benefits. Zhu Xiang was choked by Tan Xiu's words for a long time without uttering any sound. He lost. He lost in the hands of a student who had just taken the college entrance test. He suddenly felt that Tang Xiu's words just now were very reasonable. The higher one stood, the harder one fell. He had been arrogant and domineering a moment ago, insufferably arrogant. But now, the degree of disgracing himself was really high and miserable. Bai Yu looked at Zhu Xiang and sneered. If I remember correctly, you said before that if you lose, you must give Mr. Tang the authentic work of the famous Tang Dynasty painter, Li Sixuan. Your home is in Tianjin City, so it won't take you long to come here from your home, right? Zhu Xiang looked at Bai Yu with resentment, and then looked at Tan Xiu. With hatred in his eyes, Zhu Xiang looked at Bai Yu and then looked at Tan Xiu. He then said with hatred, since I'm willing to bet, I must accept my loss. I'll immediately go back to get the painting. After saying that, under the despising eyes of countless people, he rushed out of the Lotus Blossom House's door with shame. At this time, a middle-aged man in the crowd shouted, You say that surnamed Zhu lost so miserably today. Does he still have the face to come back? He won't ask someone else to send his painting back, will he? Ha! The crowd suddenly burst into laughter. Bai Yu was in a very good mood. Not only did she vent the resentment in her heart, but she also drove Zhu Xiang away. She also got to see a peerless painting. Once this painting was known to the outside world in the future, her Lotus Blossom House would rise along with it. She seemed to have seen the magnificent scene of her Lotus Blossom House being overcrowded in the future. Mr. Tang, thank you for letting me see such a good painting. All your expenses in my restaurant today will be free of charge. And I guarantee that no matter when Mr. Tang comes here in the future, he won't take a penny from us, said Bai Yu with all seriousness. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment. He then slowly nodded and said, In that case, I'll write some words for you. I hope you don't mind. Give a peach and return a plum. Since Bai Yu had treated him like this, Tan Xiu also felt that he should do something. He didn't want to create a painting, but he could write some words casually. Bai Yu's heart was shaken. She was ecstatic as she repeatedly said, Good, good, good. Thank you, Mr. Tang. Tan Xiu waved his hand. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he picked up the writing brush and wrote 6 big characters on a new piece of rice paper, Painting City, Lotus Blossom House. The bold and vigorous big characters had the charm of dancing dragons and dancing phoenixes. It was elegant with a bit of iron bones. It was hard, but also had the tenderness of chivalry. Good calligraphy. An old man, who was not only very good at painting, but also a master of calligraphy, shouted loudly with a glint in his eyes. A fanatical love rose in Bai Yu's heart the moment she saw this calligraphy. She had immersed herself in calligraphy and painting for many years, so she could naturally distinguish the good from the bad. Although she was not very familiar with this kind of calligraphy, these 6 characters were written very well. 100, no, 5 million. I'll buy this calligraphy. The old man just looked at Bai Yu without blinking, eyes full of expectation. Bai Yu's heart jumped. She hurriedly shook her head and said, No, I won't sell it. Let alone 5 million, I won't sell it even if it's 50 million. A disappointed look appeared on the old man's face. He turned to look at Tang Xiu with an expectant expression and said, Little brother, can you write another calligraphy for me? The price is negotiable. Are you sure? Tan Xiu asked with a strange expression. I'm sure. The old man nodded heavily. Tan Xiu looked around and said aloud, Is there anyone else here who needs my calligraphy? 5 million per piece, and only 4 paintings are available. I'll buy it. Mu Weining stepped forward and said without hesitation. Tan Xiu looked at her with a surprised expression. He then nodded and said, Is there anyone else? Professor Hu squinted his eyes and smilingly said, Since I can encounter such a good thing today, I'll also buy one. At this moment, a middle-aged woman came forward and loudly said, I'll buy one too. All right. Tan Xiu immediately said, These 4 paintings are sold out. No matter who wants to buy from me, I won't write anymore. After saying that, he immediately began to write. On each painting he wrote 6 words. Soon, the 4 pieces of calligraphy were written. Tan Xiu looked at the 4 people and directly told them his bank account number. The money was in his account. Tan Xiu nodded with satisfaction. He suddenly had an impulse. When he had nothing to do, should he write a few hundred paintings in one go and sell them? If he sold them all, he would become a rich man in the blink of an eye. However, this idea was just a thought. He deeply understood that the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. If he were to write hundreds of paintings, it would probably become worthless. Bai Yu looked at Tan Xiu and said with a smile, "Mr. Tang, do you still want to go back to the box just now? I've sent someone to remove the dishes and send tea and desserts. If Zhu Xiang sends the painting of River Sails Pavilion, you can also take it with you." Tan Xiu turned to look at Professor Hu. "Then go back and have a seat," Professor Hu said with a smile. Li Bai was a bit depressed at the moment. Seeing Professor Hu nod, he wanted to promise Tan Xiu that he would give his Wintertide Fluorite and Star Fragment Stone to Tan Xiu. But he wanted to go back to the box, so he decided to wait until after the banquet. At this moment, 2 women came in from the Lotus Blossom House's entrance. They were dressed fashionably and carried designer bags. Although they were in their 30s, they still had outstanding charm. Suddenly, the smile on the face of one of the women slightly faded and was replaced with a bit of surprise. "Tan Xiu?" Huang Jia looked at the face she could never forget. After a moment of hesitation, she called out loudly. Tan Xiu was about to go to the stairs with the others when he suddenly heard someone calling him. A surprised look appeared in his eyes. After he turned his head and saw Huang Jia, his mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times. If it wasn't because of his face, he really wanted to leave here immediately. With a pleasantly surprised expression, Huang Jia pulled the other woman and rushed to Tan Xiu's front. With a pleasantly surprised expression, she said, "Tan Xiu, is it really you? That's great. I originally planned to go to your house to look for you after returning to Star City from my maiden home. Please don't look for me." Tan Xiu forced a smile and said, "What I'm afraid of the most is being remembered." Huang Jie snappily said with a smile, "Apart from my husband, you're the second man who can be remembered by this Huang Jie. I really don't know what you're thinking." Chapter 222. "You can say whatever you want as long as you don't mention that request," said Tan Xiu. "But if you mention that request, we'll just pretend we never met." "Why are you so stubborn?" Huang Jie angrily said. "Being a professor at our Regal Classical Music Academy is a dream for many people. Why do you always use all sorts of excuses to refuse? I've already answered your question. Now I'll say it again for the last time. I'm really not interested in music," said Tan Xiu. "I can play music occasionally when I'm in the mood, but I can't immerse myself in music for the rest of my life. Therefore, everyone has their own aspirations. I hope you can stop there." "You?" Huang Jie was exasperated. The woman next to her looked at Tan Xiu with surprise. She then pulled Huang Jie's sleeve and smilingly said, "Sister-in-law, he turns out to be the music genius you told me about." "Hello, Tan Xiu. I'm Zhu Xinmei, Huang Jie's sister-in-law. I've been hearing her talking about you all day these days. I didn't expect you to come to Tianjin City." Tan Xiu indifferently nodded and then said, "Huang Jie, I've said my piece. Let's part ways here. Let's go, Professor Hu." Professor Hu looked at Tan Xiu with a strange expression. Li Bai and Mu Weining at the side also stared blankly at Tan Xiu. Never in their wildest dreams did they expect that someone would suddenly appear out of nowhere and unexpectedly propose to let Tan Xiu become a professor at the Regal Classical Music Academy. They all knew that the Regal Classical Music Academy was one of the top 3 major music academies in the country. Countless famous singers and stars had come out of it. Becoming a professor. Could it be that Tan Xiu's attainments in music were as high as his attainments in painting? Bai Yu squinted her eyes and smilingly said, "Mr. Tang, Zhu Xinmei is a distinguished guest of our Lotus Blossom House. Just like her younger brother, she also has profound attainments in painting. Since her sister-in-law is your friend, how about inviting her to have a chat with you? I'll talk to her about what just happened. Tan Xiao frowned and looked straight at Bai Yu, asking, her younger brother? Her surname is also Zhu, and so is that guy just now. Could she be Zhu Xiang's sister? Zhu Xinmei was surprised. Tan Xiao, you know my younger brother? Tang Xiao rolled his eyes and directly turned his head to the side. Bai Yu hesitated for a moment before she recounted everything that had happened. In the end, she solemnly said, Zhu Xinmei, I know that you have a good character, but your brother's character is truly hard to compliment. Therefore, I have already announced that in the future, my Lotus Blossom House will prohibit him from entering. Zhu Xinmei cursed, this damned guy. I knew he would cause trouble sooner or later with his conduct. Manager Bai, Tan Xiao, not only do I not mind what happened today, but I also want to thank you. If it weren't for all of you teaching him a good lesson and ruthlessly striking down his arrogance, who knows how much more trouble he would have caused in the future? Tan Xiao, you can rest assured. If he dares not to send me that River Sails Pavilion painting, I'll definitely break his legs when I go back. Seeing Zhu Xinmei's sincere and serious attitude, Tan Xiao nodded. He shook his head and sighed. The dragon has 9 sons, and each one is different. What you said really makes sense. You don't need to thank me. It's fine as long as your younger brother keeps his promise and sends the painting. Zhu Xinmei nodded and looked at Huang Jie. At this time, Huang Jie simply didn't care about the trivial matter between Tan Xiao and her brother-in-law. What she cared about was that Tan Xiao unexpectedly knew how to paint. She was well aware of her arrogant brother-in-law's painting skills. But she didn't expect that Tang Xiao turned out to be even better than him. Tan Xiao, do you really know how to paint? And you're very good at it? Tan Xiao lightly said, my level is average, but it's not a problem for me to bully mediocre people. Alright, let's call it a day. We still have other things to do. After that, he quickly gave Professor Hu a look. Professor Hu understood tacitly and said with a smile, you too, we indeed have other things to do, so we won't accompany you anymore. If you want to talk to Tan Xiao alone, you can choose another day. Huang Jie was unwilling, but her brother-in-law had just offended them, so she couldn't ask to go with Tan Xiao's group. Looking at the back of Tan Xiao's group disappearing on the stairs, Huang Jie said with a trace of resentment in her heart, Xinmei, we really need to discipline Xiangzi. If he doesn't change his character, it'll be very difficult for him to have a foothold in this society in the future. You think I don't want to? Zhu Xinmei bitterly said. I've taught him many times, but it's useless. He's arrogant and condescending. Furthermore, if it weren't for our family spending a lot of effort to help him deal with those trivial matters, I'm afraid his reputation would have spread far and wide. Huang Jie pondered for a moment and slowly said, how about I tell your brother about today's matter? Xiangzi isn't afraid of anyone, but he's afraid of your brother. I believe that if your brother comes forward, he'll definitely change. Zhu Xinmei shook her head and said, sister-in-law, please don't tell my brother about this matter. Otherwise, I'm afraid that Xiangzi's legs will be broken again. Huang Jie forced a smile and said, then what should we do? Are we just going to let him go like this? Zhu Xinmei pondered for a long time and followed the waiter to a private box. Then, she slowly said, let's see the situation first. After today's lesson, if he still doesn't change, then we'll tell my brother about this matter. Huang Jie nodded and said, all right. In another private box. After everyone sat down, Bai Yu said a few polite words and then left the box. She was, after all, not familiar with Tan Xiao. Even if she wanted to stay and curry favor with him, she was afraid that he would give her the cold shoulder. Professor Hu had been suppressing the curiosity in his heart. At this moment, there were only 4 people left. He looked at Tan Xiao and asked, Tan Xiao, aside from painting, do you really understand music? Tan Xiao nodded and said, a bit. A bit? Professor Hu, Li Bai, and Mu Weining recalled the time when they asked Tan Xiao if he really knew how to paint. His answer was, a bit. Being able to paint such a divine work, how could it be called a bit? In a flash, the trio had confirmed that Tan Xiao was really proficient in music. Otherwise, that woman would never have invited Tan Xiao to be a professor at the Regal Classical Music Academy. Professor. Nowadays, Becoming a professor was not something that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could easily achieve, especially when it was a very famous university like the Regal Classical Music Academy. Professor Hu pondered for a moment and asked, Tan Xiu, we've known each other until now. I only know that you're from Star City, and you're just a student who has just taken the college entrance test. What do you do at home? In a flash, Tan Xiu understood Professor Hu's thoughts and lightly said, Don't beat around the bush to inquire about my background. I'm just a commoner who runs a small business in my spare time after school. But you're very strange. What's strange about me? Professor Hu asked with a confused expression. Tan Xiu lightly said, Ever since I saw you for the first time, I felt a very strong death chi from you. If you're not working in a funeral parlor or a crematorium, then you're probably a grave robber. There's a scar on the left side of your neck from a long time ago. If my guess is correct, you met a zombie, right? Huff, Professor Hu suddenly stood up. Disbelief burst out from his eyes as he stared at Tan Xiu. After taking a few deep breaths, he asked in a deep voice, How did you see it? At the side, even Li Bai's complexion had a huge change. Tan Xiu waved his hand and lightly said, Sit down. Professor Hu realized that he had lost his composure. After sitting back on his seat, he still stared at Tan Xiu, wanting to get an answer from Tan Xiu. It's an era of peace now, and ordinary people rarely come into contact with corpses, Tan Xiu said. People who have just died have very little corpse chi on their bodies. Even if they are left for 10 days to half a month, only a little bit of it can be stained by the people around them. But what you have is not corpse chi, but death chi. It shows that you often come into contact with corpses that have been dead for many years. As for the scar on your neck, I think the shape is consistent with the marks left by the claws of zombies. Furthermore, the scar is pitch black, which is the result of the residual corpse poison. You deduced the result based on this? Asked Professor Hu. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, The first time I came to your shop, I already noticed that something was wrong. Your shop is full of black color, which proves that you like to stay in the gloomy and oppressive environment. I'm sure you didn't think so before. With a solemn expression, Professor Hu said, That's true. Do you want to know why? Tan Xiu lightly said. But asked Professor Hu in a deep voice. Tan Xiu pointed to his chest and lightly said, Although I don't know what method you used to remove a part of the deadly corpse poison, there was still a part left in your body. Although it didn't take your life at that time, it still buried a deep hidden danger for you. Give me your hand, I'll check your physical condition. Do you know medical skills? Professor Hu hurriedly asked. A little bit. Tan Xiu lightly said. A little bit again? At the side, Li Bai and Mu Weining looked at each other in dismay. At this moment, the two of them almost regarded Tan Xiu as an omnipotent god. How could he say a little bit? Saying a little bit from his mouth meant that his attainment was definitely very profound. Li Bai said in a deep voice, Old Hu, let him check you quickly. Professor Hu stretched out his wrist. Tan Xiu's fingers put on the pulse of Professor Hu's wrist. First the left hand, then the right hand. A minute later, he retracted his hand, shook his head and said, It's more serious than I thought. Recently, have you been waking up from nightmares every night? Poor sleep quality and sweating all over your body? Also, every time you wake up, you'll cough for a while and spit out black sticky sputum? Professor Hu's pupils suddenly shrunk as he exclaimed in shock, That's the situation. The corpse poison has invaded your heart meridian and is slowly corroding it, said Tan Xiu. It will take at least half a year to a year. Your time is coming to an end. Chapter 223. Upon hearing this, Professor Hu's complexion turned pale in an instant. Li Bai's face was full of worry as he hurriedly asked, Tang? Little brother Tang, since you can clearly check old Hu's physical condition, you should have a way to treat him, right? Please help him. We're willing to pay any price. Tan Xiu glanced at him and asked, Are you willing to give me your wintertide fluorite and star fragment stone? I'm not willing. Li Bai shook his head. Tan Xiu's complexion turned cold. Li Bai paused for 2 seconds before speaking again. Little brother Tang, I've told old Hu before on the first floor that if you can beat Zhu Xiang with your painting skills, I'll give you the 3 wintertide fluorites and the 2 star fragment stones in my hands. So, you don't need to mention this condition. Speak and change your condition. Give it to me? Tan Xiao was surprised as he sized him up. The coldness on his face gradually subsided. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, golden cicada grass and night lily. It's best to get some top-grade cordyceps and 500-year-old Polygonum multiflorum. After you find them, come find me. Professor Hu quickly asked, Little brother Tang, where can I find these herbs? I've heard of cordyceps and Polygonum multiflorum, but I've never heard of golden cicada grass and night lily. Tan Xiao was silent for a moment before he slowly said, Go to Star City and find Chen Zhizhong of the Endless Virtue Pharmaceutical. He specializes in Chinese medicinal herbs, so you should be able to find them. Professor Hu asked, Do you know Chen Zhizhong? Tan Xiao lightly said, I do. He's my apprentice. What? Professor Hu and Lu Bai exclaimed at the same time. They looked at Tan Xiao with disbelief, thinking that they were having an auditory hallucination. Mu Weining looked at Professor Hu and Lu Bai's disbelieving expression and asked with a confused expression, Who is Chen Zhizhong? Is the Endless Virtue Pharmaceuticals scale very big? Suppressing the shock in his heart, Professor Hu nodded and said, Chen Zhizhong is the Endless Virtue Pharmaceuticals owner. The company mainly deals in Chinese medicinal herbs, and its scale is huge. If I'm not mistaken, I'm afraid the total assets of the Endless Virtue Pharmaceutical exceed 10 billion. So, Tan Xiao's apprentice is actually a big boss with tens of billions in assets? Mu Weining was surprised. Tan Xiao lightly said, He's just my in-name disciple. If you want to become my personal disciple, the conditions are very harsh. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. In short, you guys should hurry up. The longer it drags on, the more difficult it will be to treat it. If I can't find the herbs I mentioned within 2 or 3 months, the corpse poison will completely invade the heart meridian and flow through the blood to the whole body. At that time, even if the almighty immortals come, they won't be able to do anything. Professor Hu quickly said, I'll rush to Star City tomorrow. Tan Xiao raised his brows and said, Since you're going to Star City tomorrow, then come with me. I made time to rush to Tianjin City. After I'm done here, I still have to rush back. Lu Bai said in a low voice, Little brother Tang, I'll send someone to deliver the wintertide fluorite and star fragment stones to Star City. Give me your address. Also, you haven't mentioned your conditions for treating old Hu. Aren't you old friends? Tan Xiao said. Since you're willing to stand up for your old friend, then take care of me in Shanghai University later. Lu Bai was puzzled and asked, Shanghai University? You want to be admitted to Shanghai University? That's right. Tan Xiao said. I've already filled my application. I'm going to apply to the Department of Archaeology at Shanghai University. I'll report to Shanghai University before September 1st. The college entrance test results and admission cutoff score haven't come out yet, right? Are you that confident that you can be admitted to Shanghai University? Do you think I'm not sure that I'm going to say it at this time? Tan Xiao asked back. Mu Weining was speechless. Although today was the first time she met Tan Xiao and the time she spent with Tan Xiao wasn't long, she found that Tan Xiao was extremely powerful. Yet, she found that Tang Xiao was extremely powerful. The most important thing was that he was very low-key and modest. Looking at Tan Xiao's confident look, she suddenly had a feeling that she would be able to see him at Shanghai University in September. Nearly an hour later, the private box's door was knocked and a middle-aged woman came in. Her eyes swept over everyone in the room and finally fell on Tan Xiao, asking, Are you Tan Xiao, Mr. Tang? That's me. Tan Xiao nodded calmly. The middle-aged woman handed the long box in her hand to Tan Xiao and said, Mr. Zhu asked me to give this to you. I've already delivered it. If you don't have any other instructions, then I'll take my leave. Tan Xiao nodded. As the middle-aged woman left, he directly opened the box and took out a scroll painting from it. Lu Bai, Professor Hu, and Mu Weining also came over. After appreciating it, Professor Hu sighed and said, It's indeed the authentic work of the famous painter of the Tang dynasty, Li Sixuan, the River Sails Pavilion painting. It seems that although Zhu Xiang's character is not good, his character is still a bit redeeming. Tan Xiao didn't know much about domestic calligraphy and painting, but he could see that it was a scroll painting with hundreds of years of history. After putting it away, he got up and said, "Now that I've got the painting, let's say goodbye." Professor Hu quickly asked, "Little brother Tang, where are you going?" Tan Xiao said, "I'm looking for a hotel to stay for the night. I'll return to Star City early tomorrow morning." Professor Hu said, "Little brother Tang, I'll arrange a hotel for you." Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "No need to trouble yourself. Since you're going to Star City with me tomorrow, go back early and pack up. We'll meet at the airport tomorrow morning." "Alright." Professor Hu nodded. Lu Bai quickly said, "Little brother Tang, if you don't mind, come with us. The hotel we're staying in is not far from here." Tan Xiao thought for a moment and then nodded. Tianjin City Sheraton 5-star Hotel. After Tan Xiao and Lu Bai and Mu Weining arrived, Lu Bai personally booked a presidential suite for Tan Xiao. Originally, Lu Bai also wanted to chat with Tan Xiao, but Tan Xiao refused with the reason that he needed to rest early. He wanted to study the magic stone coffin he bought from Professor Hu's shop. The lid of the magic stone coffin was closed, but it could be opened. However, Tan Xiao didn't have the time to study it before, so he didn't know what was inside. However, just as he finished washing up and was ready to study the magic stone coffin, a knock sounded on the door. "Is it Lu Bai again?" A cold glint flashed in Tang Xiao's eyes as he walked over and opened the door. What he saw was not Lu Bai, but the beautiful Mu Weining, who was like a celestial maiden descending to earth. "Is there something?" Tan Xiao stood at the door and asked. A strange light flashed in Mu Weining's eyes when she saw that Tan Xiao didn't invite her to come in and sit. She then said with a smile, "Aren't you going to invite me inside?" Tan Xiao lightly said, "It's late at night, and it's not convenient for a man and a woman to be alone in a room. Just say it, I still need to rest." "You?" Mu Weining looked at Tan Xiao, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. If it weren't for Tan Xiao's exceptionally clear eyes, she would have suspected that Tan Xiao was just putting on an act. However, she had a purpose for coming so late, so she said, "I'm a girl and I'm not afraid, so what are you afraid of? I have something to talk to you about." Tan Xiao hesitated for a moment before he stepped aside and followed Mu Weining into the room. After closing the door, he pointed to the sofa in the corner and said, "Have a seat." Mu Weining had a ladle-like temperament. After she slowly sat down, she saw Tan Xiao sitting in front of her and said with a smile, "To be honest, I've rarely seen a young man like you." "I've seen a lot of women like you," said Tan Xiao. Mu Weining stared blankly for a moment before she couldn't help laughing and said, "You're really special. Actually, the reason why I came to you is that I heard that you don't like calligraphy and paintings. Therefore, I want to buy the River Sails Pavilion painting in your hands. Name a price." Tan Xiao turned to look at the painting he threw on the cabinet and calmly said, "Name your price. If I'm satisfied with it, I'll sell it to you. If not, you can leave now." Mu Weining should have long thought about the price she could bear, as she said, "This painting is very precious, but I have limited money in my hands. So, I can give you 6 million yuan at most." "Is this antique, calligraphy, and painting really that valuable?" Tan Xiao was surprised. "You don't know the value of antiques, calligraphy, and paintings?" Mu Weining was surprised. Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "I rarely dabbled in it, so I don't know much about it." Mu Weining looked at Tan Xiao with a strange expression and said with a smile, "It seems that I quoted a high price. How about it? Are you willing to sell it to me?" "Take it away." Tan Xiao waved his hand. "I don't have any use for this thing, so I might as well exchange it for some real money." "I'll transfer the money to you," said Mu Weining. Quickly, Tan Xiao received a 6 million yuan transfer notification. He only had a few million yuan when he came to Tianjin City. He spent hundreds of thousands to buy the Demon Stone coffin, as well as the Wintertide Fluorite and Star Fragment Stone. The 20 million was transferred to him by Kong Xia. After selling the 4 pieces of calligraphy, he made a profit of 16 million. Adding the few million yuan he had 19 million yuan. And now, The Sail River Pavilion painting was sold for 6 million yuan, and he had 25 million yuan in total. Without hesitation, Tan Xiao directly transferred the 20 million yuan to Kang Xia and sent her a message. He then looked at Mu Weining and said, "You've achieved your purpose. Shouldn't you go now? Do you really want me to leave earlier?" Mu Weining asked with a strange expression. "Tan Xiao, don't tell me you have a problem with your sexual orientation? Don't tell me my beauty doesn't attract you at all? My sexual orientation is normal." Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "You're indeed attracted to me. I won't refuse you if you're willing to serve me in bed." However, a night of pleasure without any emotional foundation was actually very boring. Of course, there are exceptions. There's a kind of woman that I'm too lazy to touch. Mu Weining listened to Tan Xiao's fallacy and asked with a puzzled expression, "What kind of woman?" "You're still a virgin, so I don't care about you. You'll have trouble later if you take your first time. I'm not afraid of anything, but I'm afraid of trouble." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.